They said trust is the foundation of love, but trust is what destroyed me. My wife's lies, they were just the beginning. She didn't cheat with some stranger. No, it was my best friend. Every night I worked late. They were together, mocking everything I stood for. Do you know what betrayal feels like? Like a knife, slowly twisted in your gut. But I didn't just stand there, broken. No, I planned something. Something so dark, so cruel they'll never see it coming. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about revenge. And it's going to be unforgettable. A chilly wind blew the dry brown leaves across my cold front yard in the Midwest. Just a couple of weeks ago, those leaves had shown bright colors of yellow, orange, and red in the fall sunlight. Now I was fighting against the weather. My only tool to keep the leaves from blowing away was an old bamboo rake that had been passed down through my family. I worked hard to gather the last bits of summer before the first snowfall. The gray sky and cold wind reminded me that time was running out. My left arm had been hurting all day, but I figured it was normal for someone like me who was also getting older. Suddenly, as I raked, the tool slipped from my grip. I dropped to my knees, clutching my chest, overwhelmed by a pain I had never felt before. My muscles tightened painfully as I fell to the cold ground behind my house. I felt frozen with discomfort. I couldn't move. I could hear the leaves rustling beneath me as I rolled back and forth, trying to find a way to get up. I needed to regain control. I was alone, out of sight from the street and my neighbors. I had to get back to the house. Then the pain hit again. I curled up, feeling a wave of intense discomfort wash over me. I lay there, struggling to breathe. My heart was racing in my chest when I heard a voice far away. "I love you," it said softly, like a gentle breeze. There was something familiar about it. It felt almost like a dream, yet so real. No, not a dream, a memory. I heard it again. "I love you with all my heart." This time I recognized it. It was a voice I hadn't heard in over 50 years, the voice of my high school sweetheart, the first love of my life. "Tanya," I said in a shaky voice. It was all I could say, but it took me back to a warm summer night in my hometown. We lay under the stars, feeling the warmth of each other and our hearts racing, both filled with the joy of being together for the first time. Tanya turned toward me and gently touched my cheek. "I love you," she said. "I love you with all my heart." I still remember how it all began. Back then, it seemed like the most unlikely romance. I wasn't exactly a ladies' man. In elementary school, I had red hair, freckles, and wore glasses. The girls in my class often made fun of me, but I changed a lot by high school. My hair got darker, the freckles faded, but I still wore glasses and felt a bit shy, even with the small popularity I had as the school photographer. Tanya Dickens was a cheerleader and one of the most popular girls in school. She and I were in the same English literature class, but aside from that, I didn't really talk to her much, except for taking pictures of her at football and basketball games. I still remember that chilly Friday night in November after the football game. I felt someone tap my shoulder from behind. I turned around and saw Tanya, bundled up in her winter coat over her cheerleader outfit. "Hi, Brent," she said, her voice like music to my ears. "If it's not too much trouble, could you give me a ride home tonight?" My mind went blank. Stay calm, I told myself. Don't get nervous. Just answer her. "Of course, Tanya, no problem." I felt a rush of relief. I talked to her and didn't embarrass myself, at least not yet. The drive from school to her house was only 10 minutes, but it felt like the longest 10 minutes ever. When I parked, she didn't wait for me to get out and open the door for her like I had learned to do. Instead, she opened the door right away, gave me a smile that could brighten anyone's day, and simply said thank you. Then she walked inside, leaving me sitting there, feeling a little foolish. As I drove away, I thought that even if I lived to be 100, I would never forget this night, the night Tanya Dickens rode in my car. I had no idea then that there would be many more nights to cherish. The next week felt like any other week at school, until Friday in English Lit. I was already sitting in my seat when I felt someone tap my shoulder. I looked up again at Tanya's cheerful face. "Are you taking pictures at the game tonight, Brent?" "Of course I'll be there," I said, trying not to get too anxious. "Could you give me a ride home again?" she asked. I could hardly believe it. 2 weeks in a row? Absolutely, I said quickly, wondering if I sounded too eager. Great, she replied with excitement. I'll see you tonight then. That night, all I could think about was driving Tanya home again. What if she wanted to chat? What would we talk about? I was so nervous that I almost forgot to take pictures. I didn't have a single good photo for the school newspaper until late in the fourth quarter. Luckily, I was in the right spot when I captured a fantastic shot of the winning touchdown. Nice shot, kid, I heard from my left. I looked over and recognized the man speaking. He was the head photographer for the biggest newspaper in the state. They sometimes covered high school sports in our area. Thanks, I said. It was just a lucky shot. In this game, kid, there's no such thing as luck. Sports photography needs a sharp eye and quick timing. You just showed both. Are you a senior? He asked. Yes, sir. The tall man came closer, pulled out his wallet, and took out a business card. He held it out to me. You've got talent, kid. If you're interested in learning about the newspaper after graduation, give me a call. He smiled and walked toward the parking lot. What a night this was turning out to be, I thought. Just then, Tanya came running up and grabbed my arm. She was so excited about our big win. Hey, she said, still holding on to me. A bunch of kids are going to the restaurant in town. Do you think we could join them, or do you need to go home right away? Everything was happening so fast. Whose life was I really living? It didn't feel like my own. Just last week, Tanya was in my car, and now she was talking about a date? Well, maybe not exactly a date, but it sure felt like it. Sure, Tanya. Just then, a couple more popular kids from school came over. So, are you two going to meet us there? Asked Judy, another cheerleader. Yeah, Brent and I are on our way now, Tanya answered. When we arrived at the restaurant, they joined several tables together for us. I sat next to Tanya and found myself chatting with some of the cool kids, almost feeling like I fit in. Our food had just arrived when two more classmates walked in, Pete and Daryl, the stars of the game that night. Pete was the quarterback who led the team to victory, and Daryl was the tight end who made the amazing catch. Hey, Brent, Daryl called out as if we were friends. Did you catch that moment when I caught the pass? I was surprised he even knew my name. Yes, I got it, I replied. I took the shot right as you reached for the ball. Great, he said happily. I'll probably be in the paper. I didn't think the night could get any better until we were back at Tanya's driveway. This time, I was prepared. Hold on a second, I said, as I stepped out of the car and walked to the passenger side. She smiled and got out as I opened the door for her. In that moment, it felt like everything was perfect. Thanks, she said. I really enjoyed tonight. Then she stood on her tiptoes and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I hardly remember the drive home after that. The next weekend was even more exciting. Our team won again, securing their place in the sectionals. Tanya was so thrilled that she hugged me and jumped around, giving me quick pecks on the cheek. Having Tanya so close made me feel a bit shy but happy. I felt really embarrassed when I noticed my body reacting unexpectedly. A few times, Tanya's cheerful outfit brushed against me, and I didn't know how to handle it. I felt my face getting warm, and I heard Tanya laugh a couple of times. I wasn't sure if she knew how I felt, or if she was just happy about the game. Either way, I decided not to bring it up. Later that night, more kids came to the restaurant to celebrate the win. In addition to discussing the game, everyone was excited about my photo of last week's winning play. I felt like I was in a different world when some kids came up to me, praising my photography skills. Then, on Tuesday, my old friend Jim from grade school came over while I was getting books from my locker. I could tell from his face that he wanted to talk about something important. Hey, Jim, what's going on? I asked. He looked at me for a moment before he spoke. Are you really seeing Tanya Dickens? He asked, his voice showing he couldn't believe what he was asking. Where did you hear that? I replied. It was nice to be complimented, but my first thought was worry. I hoped Tanya wouldn't hear this and get upset. It was fine to drive her home and hang out with friends after games, but if she heard someone say dating, she might think I started the rumor and be really mad. It's all over school, Jim said, still looking confused. Is it true? Are you really going out with Tanya? No, Jim, that's not true. Her house is along my route home, so I've been giving her a ride after the games, that's all. You don't really think she'd go out with me, do you? I saw the look on Jim's face. He seemed happy. I'm not sure why. Maybe he thought we wouldn't be friends if I was actually dating Tanya. I didn't know. We both had to get to our classes, so after a few laughs, he headed one way and I went the other, wondering if Tanya had heard the talk and if she would still want to talk to me. A couple of days later, I felt good when Tanya stopped to say hi to me in the hall. Either she hadn't heard the talk or she just didn't care, I thought. That Friday night felt ordinary. Football season was coming to an end, and it looked like we had a good chance at making it far in the playoffs. As was becoming usual, Tanya and I met some of the kids at a restaurant after the game to chat about our team's win. I had felt nervous all evening. I knew Tanya would eventually hear the rumor about us dating, and I didn't want her to think I was the one who started it. So as we pulled into her driveway, I decided to take a chance. "Tanya," I said, feeling uneasy, "I heard there's a rumor at school about us dating, and I just wanted to say that I didn't start it, that's all." I saw her smile fade, and I worried that I had messed things up. It seemed she hadn't even heard the rumor until I mentioned it. "Are you ashamed of dating me?" she asked. This confused me even more. I didn't have a sister and had no experience with girls. I couldn't tell if she was joking or being serious. My dad had always said, "Sincerity is what women rely on when nothing else works." I didn't know how to respond. Then, without really thinking, the words just came out. "No way, Tanya. Are you serious? I really like you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I wished I could take them back, but it was too late. My eyes went wide as Tanya's smile returned. "Oh no, Tanya, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to put you in that position. I didn't mean to say that." "Oh, so you don't really like me?" "No, I mean, yes, but—" "Shh," Tanya said, putting her finger to my lips. "Wow, that's the first time anyone has told me they like me like that. Look," she continued, "my parents want to meet the person who's been giving me rides home. Why don't you come in and say hi?" "Oh, man," I said. "I've already made a mess of tonight. I don't know if I should—" "Oh, come on," she replied. "You haven't messed up anything. Just come in for a minute." I hesitantly agreed. Tanya took my hand and led me inside. "Well, you're the young man we've heard so much about," said her dad with a warm smile as he shook my hand. "Dad," Tanya said, a little shy, "don't embarrass me, please." He chuckled and invited me to sit down. Tanya's younger sister came running in, curious to see me. As we all talked, I started to feel more at ease when Tanya's mom brought me a cold drink from the fridge. I realized that Tanya didn't live in some grand place. Her family was just like mine. Her dad was straightforward, similar to my own. I really liked her family, and they seemed to like me too. When it was time for me to go, Tanya walked me to the door. "I don't know about love, Brent," she said honestly, "but I like you a lot. And if you ever want to ask me out on a real date, I'd be happy to say yes." Then she reached up, put her arms around my neck, and kissed me. It was the first time I had ever been kissed. I remember thinking at that moment, if something were to happen to me right now, I would have no regrets. I had just shared a special moment with Tanya Dickens, and I felt on top of the world. Wow, 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 was all that went through my mind as I drove home. What should I do next? I had never been on a real date before, and I had never had a girlfriend. What am I going to do? I really need to talk to someone and get some advice, but who? I can't talk to my parents, especially about girls. That feels too awkward. Denny? Of course, my cousin Denny. He was 9 years older than me and already married. Denny and I were more like brothers than just cousins. His wife, Cindy, was very lovely, too. Not as lovely as Tanya, of course, but still very nice. Tomorrow was Saturday, and Denny was free, so I could go visit him and chat. On Saturday morning during breakfast, all I could think about was Tanya and the conversation I wanted to have with my cousin. But first, I had to help my dad finish some yard work. He gave me one of the new bamboo rakes he had just bought, and we spent the next 4 hours raking and burning leaves. After dinner, I told my parents I was going to Denny's for a bit. They reminded me not to stay out too late since we had church on Sunday. When I arrived at Denny's, I was happy to see Cindy in the kitchen doing the dishes. Denny and I settled down in the living room. I think he could tell from my expression that I wanted to talk about something important. "Okay, Brent, you look worried. What's up?" he asked. "Well," I said quietly so Cindy wouldn't hear, "I need some advice. There's a girl at school. I really like her, and I want to ask her out, but—" "Hey, man, it's about time," Denny interrupted. "Who is she? Is she nice? Hey, Cindy, come on in. Brent has a girlfriend." I frowned, knowing this would ruin the private talk I wanted. Cindy walked into the living room drying her hands on a dish towel. She had a big smile, and when she sat next to me on the couch, I could feel the awkwardness coming. "Brent, that's awesome," Cindy said. "Do we know her?" "No, not really. Her name is Tanya Dickens. She's a cheerleader at school." "A cheerleader!" Denny exclaimed, sounding surprised. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, eager to hear more. "I think that's great," Cindy said. "Yeah, she's really special," I replied, feeling proud. "But, well, I want to take her out on a date, but I'm not sure what to do." Before I could finish, Denny jumped in again. "Just focus on what she likes, man. That always works, right?" I looked at my cousin, surprised. "Just make sure to be nice and confident," he continued. "Hey, show him how to impress her, honey," he said with a smile at his wife. I felt my face grow warm. Cindy turned to me. "Denny, please stop. You're making him uncomfortable." Denny chuckled and looked at me. "I've never seen anyone blush so much." "Brent," Cindy said kindly, "you're a good person. Just be yourself and you'll do great." "Oh, come on, Cindy," I said, feeling anxious. "She can have any guy. I can't believe she likes me. At least I think she does. She seems to—" "What do you mean you don't see why she likes you?" asked Cindy, sounding frustrated. "You're smart, funny, and good-looking. You have a really nice personality. Any girl would be happy to be your date," Cindy said. "I don't know, Cindy. It just feels hard to believe that she really likes me. Plus, I have no idea where to take her or what to do," I replied. Cindy paused for a moment. "Why not take her to a movie?" "That's a great choice, Brent. Pick a nice romantic comedy or let her choose. When the lights go down, you can put your arm around her. After the movie, you could take her to a nice restaurant. If you're not sure what to say, you can talk about the movie." "Yeah," I said, imagining having my arm around Tanya. "That sounds like a good idea." "Hey, there's a fun trick," Denny said with a laugh. "You can cut a hole in the bottom of the popcorn box and put it on your lap." "Come on, stop!" Cindy shouted, her face beaming. The next Monday at school, I was trying to figure out how to talk to Tanya. I had the movie section from the Sunday newspaper with me. I stood by my locker, hoping for a chance to speak to her alone when someone nudged me with their hip. I turned to see who it was. "So," Tanya said with a big grin, "have you thought more about what we discussed?" For the first time since I gave Tanya that ride home, I began to think she might really like me. Why? I wasn't sure. Every guy in school wanted to date her, but I felt a little bit of that old confidence melting away. I couldn't help but smile. "Tanya, I thought about it all weekend," I said, reaching for the movie section in my locker. "I know it's short notice, but would you like to go out on Saturday night?" "I thought we could go to the movies," I said. Tanya smiled, took the movie section from my hands, and motioned for me to lean down. When I did, she kissed me gently on the lips. "Tanya and Brent sitting in a tree, K-I-S-S-I-N-G," we heard Becky Peterson, one of the popular girls at school, sing playfully. Tanya grinned. "Eat your heart out, Becky," she called back with a playful tilt of her head. I could hardly believe this was happening. I kept thinking that any moment I would wake up and find out it had all been a dream. For the rest of the day, I think I went to my classes. I must have been there in person, but in my mind, I couldn't remember anything after that kiss. All I could see was Tanya and me, standing together with wedding bells ringing above us. I was really in love. That Friday night was a big letdown. Our team lost the second game of the sectionals, and it was tough. Tanya looked upset when she came over. She wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her head on my chest. I wrapped my arm around her to offer comfort. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said without thinking. It was a name my dad used for my mom, and it felt natural to say it. I wasn't sure if Tanya even noticed it, but she didn't respond. There would be no fun dinner at the restaurant tonight. No joking around or compliments about my photography. The game was played at the rival school, which made our ride home feel heavy and quiet. I cared about school spirit, but I knew this loss hurt Tanya much more than it did me. As we traveled home, I thought about our date the next night. Would Tanya be in a bad mood all evening? Maybe she wouldn't feel like going at all and might decide to cancel. My worries eased a bit when Tanya moved closer on the bench seat of my old Chevy and rested her head on my shoulder. On Saturday night, I hadn't heard anything different, so I drove to Tanya's house at 6:45 just like we planned. Her mother must have seen me arrive because she opened the door and welcomed me in before I could even knock. As soon as I walked into the living room, Tanya appeared. I knew this moment would come, and it finally did. She looked so lovely that when I opened my mouth to compliment her, I found myself at a loss for words. All that came out was nonsense, and it happened right in front of her parents. I must have turned bright red when Tanya smiled, walked over, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. She said, "Brent, you say the sweetest things." That made her dad chuckle and her sister giggle. "You look amazing," I said. That little kiss was like magic. Suddenly I could speak again. Tanya took my arm as we said goodnight to her family, and we were on our way. At the movie, we grabbed some popcorn and a couple of drinks before we found our seats. I couldn't help but smile as I remembered a funny joke from my cousin. Tanya noticed and asked what was making me smile, so I had to think quickly. "Well, I'm sitting here with the most beautiful and kindest girl in the world. Why wouldn't I smile?" I replied. Just then, the lights dimmed. Tanya reached over and gently turned my face to hers. She moved in closer, and I felt her hand on the back of my head as she leaned in. We shared a sweet kiss, and I could feel my heart racing in that moment. Tanya leaned in, and I felt her lips press softly against mine. I wanted to enjoy the moment, but I felt nervous and awkward about a problem I was having. I was sure she noticed my discomfort. I tried to clear my mind and focus on the kiss, moving my lips gently with hers. When we finally pulled away, Tanya had a big smile on her face. It was clear she knew I was feeling uneasy. A wave of concern crossed my mind. Was she teasing me? I began to regret not paying more attention to my cousin's advice about relationships. What if she really wanted to take things further? I'm not sure what to say, as I've never been on a date before. I wrapped my arm around her and brought her close. The screen lit up with the first of 3 cartoons before the movie started. We both laughed as the Roadrunner outsmarted Wile E. Coyote once again. Sometimes Tanya would take her hand away for popcorn or a drink, but she always returned it. By the end of the movie, I was starting to feel more at ease. The rest of the evening went well, too. I was beginning to believe that Tanya, one of the prettiest and most popular girls in school, really liked me. I felt more relaxed and let my true self shine. I had always been the class clown, making people laugh, but I had been too shy to show that side of me around Tanya until that night. We talked and laughed all night long. When I got Tanya to her doorstep around midnight, I started to think of her as my girlfriend. This was a new feeling for me, but it felt really nice. "Did you have a good time?" I asked, looking into her deep blue eyes. "I had a great time," she replied with a smile. "Would it be okay if I asked you to go out again next Saturday?" I said. "Next Saturday and the Saturday after that would be just fine," she answered. She reached up and wrapped her arms around my neck. I pulled her close, holding her waist and sharing a warm kiss. The next Saturday, Tanya was running a bit late, so I got to know her mom and dad better while I waited. "Tanya says you have a job after school. What do you do?" Mr. Dickens asked. "I work at the car dealership in town, sir. I clean the new and used cars that come in," I answered. "I work every night except Fridays until 9 o'clock, and I work on Saturdays from 8 to 3. "I understand," he replied, sounding somewhat impressed. "When do you manage to do your homework?" "I do it when I get home from work. That's the only time I have," I explained. "Did your dad buy that car outside for you?" he asked. "No, sir. You don't know my dad. He thinks people should earn what they have. I had to pay for the car all at once, and I also had to pay for a whole year's insurance. I had been saving for the last 2 years to buy a car, and last summer I worked 2 jobs to cover the insurance costs," I said with a smile. In my sophomore year, I was determined to have my own car by senior year. I worked hard to make it happen, and I felt proud of what I had achieved. I could tell my dad was proud of me, too, even though he never said it out loud. Just then, Tanya walked into the kitchen, ready to go. I got a bit nervous as I glanced at her. I had no doubt in my mind. I was dating the most beautiful girl in the world. "Tanya, you look amazing," I said. "Thank you, Brent," she replied with a big smile. We said our goodbyes to her parents and headed out to the movies again. As I drove, I realized that I would need to think of new places to take her if we were going to keep this going. This time the movie was a comedy, and we both laughed so hard we cried. I had my arm around her back as we walked from the theater to the car. I was ready to head to our usual restaurant when Tanya said she wanted to show me something. We drove a couple of miles out of town and turned onto a dirt road. "Where are we, Tanya?" I asked. "We're behind the old cemetery," she said lightly. "The old cemetery? What are we doing back here?" As soon as I asked, I realized what this place was about. I thought to myself, wow, I still have so much to learn. Tanya just chuckled softly. Brent looked at Tanya, knowing they had been seeing each other for a few months now. He thought he had shown her that he really liked her, but she had never tried to get closer to him. "You're not gay, are you?" she asked. That question made him nervous. It felt like he was stepping into unknown territory every week. He wasn't sure how to behave around girls, but he was eager to learn. "No, Tanya, I'm not gay. Honestly, I'm still surprised that you like me at all. In the past few months, it felt like I was living in a wonderful dream, and I was scared to say or do anything that might change it." She smiled again and turned her body, gently moving her leg over my lap to sit closer to me. She was facing me with her arms around my shoulders, and she leaned in to kiss me. I wrapped my arms around her, not wanting to let go. We shared a sweet kiss for a few minutes until she shifted, and I could tell she was getting uncomfortable. When she moved back to sit beside me, I felt a bit flustered and uneasy. Tanya looked at me with a playful smile. "I see you like me too," she said. She reached toward me, and I quickly grabbed her hand. "I want to know how you feel," she said softly. I hesitated, but let her touch my knee with her hand. Her words caught me off guard. "I've been thinking about this," she added, leaning in for another kiss. I had never felt so nervous in my life. Here was the girl of my dreams, the one I cared about deeply, wanting to be close to me, and I wasn't sure what to do next. It was time to visit my cousin Denny again, but this time we needed to have a more serious conversation. "Tanya," I started, feeling a bit shy. "Have you ever been with someone?" she guessed, trying to help me out. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "No, I haven't, and I'm pretty sure," she said with a smile, "that you haven't either." I let out a small, nervous laugh. "What gave it away?" she laughed. "Tanya, just so I don't embarrass myself any more than I already have tonight, are you really saying you would like to share a special moment with me?" I couldn't believe I just asked that of any girl, especially Tanya. She smiled at me again and kissed me, leaving me wondering, did I just say something silly? I really hoped she would tell me what she thought. Finally, she broke the kiss and looked into my eyes. "Yes, Brent, that's exactly what I'm saying." My hands suddenly felt wet. My whole body felt warm. I might have looked scared. Tanya smiled, closed her eyes, and kissed me again, gently this time. I started to feel more comfortable. She pulled back and took a deep breath, smiling at me. "I don't want to go any further right now, Brent," she said, looking into my eyes. "Please understand. I care about you, but this isn't the right time." I understood completely. I touched her cheek gently. "It's okay," I said. "I'm going to plan something special for us. I want to give you the best night ever." She smiled brightly. "Can you save up for a hotel room?" she asked. "That would be okay with me. I really don't want my first time to happen in the back seat of your car." "My sweet Tanya, people might write stories about your first time," I said, smiling widely, though I still had no idea how I was going to make that happen. "Well, if they do," Tanya replied, smiling back, "I hope they don't use our names." We both laughed a little nervously and stayed outside a bit longer, sharing gentle kisses. The car ride home was quiet. I think we were both thinking about what we had decided. The only thing I knew for sure was that I wanted to get Tanya something special, something meaningful that would remind her of this moment every time she looked at it. I decided to ask Cindy for help. "Do you think it's too early for an engagement ring?" I asked Cindy. "Whoa there, are you serious?" she replied, looking surprised. "You really care about this girl, don't you?" "Cindy, I love her with all my heart," I said. She looked into my eyes and saw how genuine I was. "Brent, I know you probably don't want to hear this, and I can see you love her, but you are still very young. She might just be one of many girls you'll have in your life." "Cindy, I know I'm young, maybe too young, but all I know is how much I love her," I said, feeling tears starting to form. "Brent, has she said she loves you?" Cindy asked gently, sensing I might not have a positive answer. "Well," I said quietly, "kind of. This was not the talk I wanted with Cindy. I wanted to have this conversation with my cousin Denny." "What do you mean, kind of, Brent?" I just sat quietly, looking at her. I really didn't want to discuss this with Cindy, but she was sharp. She covered her mouth in surprise. "Brent, did you go out with her?" "No," I replied. "Not yet, anyway. We talked the other night. She's new to this and—" "Well?" "She wants her first experience with me. I said, grinning widely. Doesn't that mean she cares about me? At first, Cindy was quiet. She just stared at me. Finally, she spoke softly. Brent, well, I can't really disagree with you. She's young, too, but it sounds like you two have had a good talk. I'm really happy for you, Brent. You're a good person, and I hope this works out. Thanks, Cindy, I said, still blushing from our talk. But you still haven't answered my question. What kind of gift can I get her to mark this special moment? We brainstormed several ideas, focusing on what she might like and what I could afford. We were narrowing it down when Denny walked in. Hi, Brent, he said cheerfully. How's it going? Oh, by the way, how are things with the cheerleader? I glanced at Cindy, and she understood. You boys have some things to discuss, she said with a smile. I'm going to start dinner. Brent, do you want to stay for dinner? Oh, no thanks, Cindy. I need to head home soon. Denny was about to turn on the TV when I asked if I could talk to him first. He sat down in his chair across from the couch and invited me to start. Den, promise you'll take this seriously, I said, trying to hide my nerves. Yeah, okay, he replied. What's this about? You look like you've got something on your mind. Well, remember a couple weeks ago when you joked about something private? I lowered my voice. Denny's jaw dropped. Well, I'm ready to talk about that now, I said with a big grin. Tanya and I have been having conversations. She hasn't had her first experience yet, and I want it to be special for her. I want it to be something she will remember. Oh, she's new to this, but you're not? Denny asked, not letting me off the hook so easily. I looked down and felt shy. No, I admitted, not feeling proud about it. I haven't had that experience either. Hey, don't feel bad about that. It shows you are responsible. Plus, the fact that you both can talk about it openly instead of just rushing into things shows maturity. Seriously, Brent, I'm proud of you. Really? Thanks, Denny. I thought you might tease me. Not about something like this. It's a big deal. Honestly, I'm glad you came to me. Who else could I talk to? I replied with a smile. My dad? Denny chuckled. Yeah, good point. All right, he said, getting serious. Just remember to keep it romantic. There will be moments when you feel like rushing into things, but this isn't one of them. Take your time. Focus on every little detail. Make her feel like she is the only one that matters in that moment. Each thought and action should be about making her feel special. I was surprised by his seriousness. Denny didn't joke at all as he explained how to be considerate and focus on her experience. For the next hour, I listened closely to everything my cousin shared. I could imagine sharing that moment with Tanya as he spoke. He made me promise to be responsible and even suggested I practice how to prepare properly. There's nothing worse than making her wait while you struggle with your raincoat, he said. Denny carefully talked about how a woman's body works. There's so much more to a woman than just one part of her, he said. He explained about different sensitive areas and how important it is to understand and appreciate them. The most important thing, Den said as he finished talking, is to be genuine. A woman can always tell if you're not sincere. I know this will be your first time too, but aim to make it special for her. She wants this to be a memorable night. If you do that for her, it will also be memorable for you. As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything my cousin shared with me. I might have been a beginner, but I felt sure that I understood enough not to embarrass myself. I knew I could show my love for Tanya in a meaningful way. Now, I needed to think about the perfect place. It had to be more special than a simple motel room. I was going to share a beautiful moment with the woman I dreamed about. It needed to be somewhere amazing. For the next few days and nights, all I could think about was my time with Tanya. I had a big smile on my face, and everyone, teachers, my parents, friends, except Tanya and my cousin, wondered what was happening with me. What was going on in my mind? Winter had ended, and spring was here with warm breezes, almost like summer. With spring in the Midwest, road construction was everywhere. One night after work, I took a back road home. As I drove to the edge of town, I passed the county fairgrounds. Wow, I thought. Wouldn't it be something to have a special moment with Tanya there? It was a vast stretch of lovely hills lined with trees, featuring a small, charming lake. A 100-year-old covered bridge crossed over a gentle stream that meandered through the peaceful landscape. I thought to myself that it would be nice to lay down some blankets on the soft grass by the lake and enjoy a lovely evening under the stars. But there was a problem. The whole area was surrounded by a tall fence that was locked every night after dark. I could try to make a hole in the fence, but that wouldn't be very romantic. And I didn't think Tanya would like that idea. Plus, someone might notice and come check it out. No, that wouldn't work. I needed to come up with another plan. Or did I? As I drove home, I began to think more about the fairgrounds. The next morning, I left for school a bit earlier than usual. I took the back road so I could pass by the entrance to the fairgrounds. There were 2 big gates about 30 feet apart for vehicles. Next to each were smaller gates just for people. All the gates had a heavy chain wrapped around them, locked with a big padlock. At lunchtime, when the gates were open, I ran by again. Just as I thought, it was the perfect place, and I started to form my plan. The calendar in our kitchen showed the moon stages. Everything needed to be just right. In just 10 days, the moon would be full. That would be the night. So far, my plan was lining up perfectly, as if I had help from above. That weekend, I visited 3 hardware stores until I found exactly what I needed. Now all I needed was a little luck. I hoped it wouldn't rain and that the warm, summer-like nights would last for another week. I chose a gift for Tanya but needed to borrow $50 from my dad. I promised to repay him $10 each week. I might look for extra hours at work to cover the rest, and I was fine with that. After a week and a half of getting ready and a lot of hope, the big night had finally arrived. Tanya knew I had something special planned, but she didn't know what. I felt a bit nervous talking to Tanya's parents before we left that night. I wondered if her dad could read my thoughts. I hoped he couldn't see the surprise I had saved in my pocket. Her parents and little sister, Jackie, told her to have a great evening as we stepped out. It was like they knew something. Without my own parents knowing, I had taken some money from my savings. I wanted to take her out for a nice dinner, something more fancy and special than Charlie's, the place we usually went to. We drove to a restaurant my cousin had recommended. It was a bit expensive, but the romantic vibe made it worth it. I could see that Tanya was impressed as soon as we walked in. The host greeted us and showed us to our table with menus. "Oh, Brent," Tanya whispered so I wouldn't feel bad. "This place is too much. Look at these prices. Let's just go to Charlie's. I'm fine with that." "Tanya, this is your night," I replied. "Don't think about the prices. I want you to pick anything you like." She smiled so brightly. I watched her and thought to myself, she has no idea how special this evening will be. If everything goes well, she will remember this night forever. As my cousin promised, the restaurant was perfect. The food was great, and the atmosphere was just what I wanted for the rest of the evening. I took my time driving back to town, making sure the fairgrounds were clear. There wasn't a good spot to park near the entrance after dark, so we ended up parking about 4 blocks away. Tanya looked at me as I opened the car door. "What are you doing? Where are we going?" she asked. "Why are we parking here?" "It's part of a small surprise I have for you, dear," I replied with a wide smile. I walked over and opened the door for her, then went to the trunk and lifted it open. Inside, I found 2 thick blankets. I tucked them under my arm and took Tanya's hand. "Come on, we have to walk a few blocks," I said. Tanya looked at me with confusion but took my hand and started walking with me. When we reached the gate and noticed it was locked, Tanya gave me a puzzled look. "Brent, what are you doing? You know we can't get in here after dark." "Hold these for a second," I said, handing her the blankets. With a big smile, I pulled out a special key from my pocket. I inserted it into the lock, and the gate opened. Tanya stared at me in shock. "Where did you get a key to the fairgrounds?" I stayed quiet and enjoyed my mysterious moment as we stepped inside. I quickly locked the gate behind us and took the blankets back from her. I wished I had a camera to capture her surprised expression. Ah, yes, I thought to myself, a trick worthy of a magician. Well, not quite. When I returned that day at lunch, I saw that they had left the padlocks unlocked and hanging from the chain after opening them in the morning. All I needed to do was find a matching lock and swap them before I picked up Tanya. They would use my lock to close up that night, the one for which I had the key. Before we headed home that evening, I just had to remember to switch the locks back. Tanya placed her arm around my waist, and I did the same as we walked along the path leading through the covered bridge and down to the lake. I found the perfect spot and set out both blankets, one on top of the other. The night felt soft and cozy, like being on a fluffy bed. We lay next to each other, gazing at the bright moon shining down from the sky. "I can't believe how you did this, Brent. Tonight has been amazing," she said, sounding dreamy. I was happy to have her close. I put my arm around her shoulder to pull her nearer. My hand reached into my pocket to show her a special surprise. "Look," I said, pointing up. "That's the North Star." As Tanya looked where I was pointing, I took out a thin gold chain and let the pendant fall into her view. It was her gift, a gold heart with a tiny diamond in the center. She gasped and reached out for it. I gently placed the chain in her hand. "This is for you," I said softly. After a moment, she found her voice again. "Oh, Brent, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she exclaimed. I smiled and whispered, "I knew this was the right gift because you are the most beautiful person I know." She turned and hugged me tightly, giving me a warm kiss. Our lips met for a moment, and then I gently turned her over, kissing her cheek softly as I slowly started to unfasten the buttons of her shirt. When she noticed what I was doing, she pulled back a little and looked at me. "Here? Now?" she asked, surprised. "Right here, right now," I replied softly. "Oh, Brent," she said, pulling me close. I remembered the importance of keeping it special and sweet. I stood up and took her hand, helping her to her feet. She closed her eyes as I stepped behind her, carefully unfastening her shirt. I gently kissed her neck and shoulders, feeling the warmth of the moment. Before long, she stood in front of me, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. I held her close and we lay down together. She looked up at me as I quietly removed my clothes, smiling softly. With gentle hands and tender touches, I explored her body, feeling the connection between us grow deeper. She let out soft sounds, her body reacting to the closeness we shared. Her hands held me close, and I could sense her emotions rising one after the other. Listening to my instincts, I knew it was time to continue. I carefully prepared, then slowly guided us into a deeper, more meaningful connection. Her eyes met mine, and with a gentle voice, she whispered that she was ready. I kissed her softly, moving with care, as we both embraced the moment. I paused for a brief moment, noticing her soft words, but this time they carried a different tone, one of comfort. I carefully moved forward, taking my time. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of warmth and relief. Suddenly, her reaction surprised me as she let out a joyful sound, her body tensing up as emotions rushed through her. She held me close, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck as we shared the moment. "Are you all right?" I asked gently as she slowly returned to a calmer state. She bit her lower lip and nodded, still finding it hard to speak. "Have you reached the end yet?" she finally asked, catching her breath. "No, but that's okay," I replied. "Tonight is all about you." "Oh no," she insisted firmly. "Let's keep going, please. We need to share this experience together." I smiled as I gently continued. Tanya kept her eyes open this time, looking up at the starry sky while we moved together. It didn't take long for either of us to feel the excitement building. I could feel everything tightening, and I knew something special was about to happen. At that moment, I sensed Tanya's response, realizing she felt it too. It felt like our feelings burst forth in harmony. We lay together, gazing at the stars, our bodies close. "I love you," Tanya whispered softly. "I love you with all my heart." In that moment, I knew I had created a beautiful and unforgettable night for her. "I love you too, Tanya, probably more than you will ever know," I said with pride. After that night, we cherished every moment we had together. We always made time to be with each other. By graduation, everyone at school thought we were meant to get married, and I did too. I remember the summer after graduation as the best summer ever. I had gotten a job with the newspaper and was looking for a place where Tanya and I could always be together. But as the summer went on, my happiness began to turn into worry. In the fall, I would start taking evening classes at a community college, while Tanya would be attending college far away. We would be apart for months, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. The night before she left, we both cried and promised to love each other always. 5 months later, I got a letter from Brent. She told me she had found a nice guy and asked me to be happy for her. "You will always have a special place in my heart," she wrote. She also wished for me to find someone special one day. A sudden wave of pain pulled me from my thoughts and brought me back to reality. I tried to lift my head. I needed to know where I was, but all I could see was the darkening sky above. I struggled to gain my strength. I had to get to the house to seek help. I fought to stay awake, but I was having a hard time breathing and felt dizzy. I do love you. I love you very much. Another voice drifted into my mind. It wasn't Tanya's. It was a voice I knew well. It was Chris, the woman I had spent 10 years with and the mother of my 2 daughters. I remembered when she first said those words to me so long ago. I could picture her clearly in my mind, resting on her elbow and looking at me after a long night together. I tried again to lift my head, but I was still too weak. I could feel my energy fading, and I knew I needed to take a moment to gather myself. As I lay there, I thought back to when Chris first came into my apartment with my good friend George. She was incredibly beautiful, and for the first time since I lost Tanya, I felt a spark of interest. Brent, George, my friendly and cheerful friend, said, "Meet Chris, but in the modeling world, she's called K.A." I stepped forward and gently shook her hand. "Hello, Chris. It's nice to meet you," I said, trying hard to keep my words steady. "Please, have a seat. Can I get you something to drink? I have soft drinks and other options available." "Thank you," she replied. "I'll have a glass of white wine if you have it." "1 glass of white wine coming right up," I replied. "George, would you like your usual drink?" "Yeah," he said, settling into the chair across from Chris. "That sounds good, Brent, thanks." As I headed toward the bar, George began to talk. "Brent here is the best newspaper photographer in the city," he told Chris. "He works at the Times." George liked to exaggerate a lot, but I didn't mind him boosting my confidence in front of Chris. I could tell what he was going to say next when he started to laugh. "You know the difference between his job and mine?" he asked. Chris shook her head. "I photograph the living people. He photographs the ones who aren't alive anymore." This was George's ongoing joke since he had accompanied me to a scene once. A local troublemaker had ended up in a difficult situation and was found in a restaurant. I took a few photos before the scene was cleared, which is why George used that line. Meanwhile, George was the lead photographer for one of the largest studios in the city. They were experts at taking pictures for catalogs and did most of the work for companies like Sears, J.C. Penney, and Montgomery Ward, as well as many others who created catalogs. George worked with lots of local models every day, so there were always people around. Most of the time, George's little joke didn't bother me, but I didn't want this beautiful woman to think of me as someone related to anything unpleasant. "Don't pay attention to him," I said to Chris. "He's just envious because I get my name in the paper every day." I handed out the drinks. "White wine for the lady," I said as Chris reached for the glass in my hand, "and bourbon for George." Before long, we were all busy chatting. Chris was really easy to talk to and had a smile that could brighten even the darkest night. As the night went on, George asked if I could give Chris a ride home. I started to wonder what George was up to. He hadn't explained why he wanted to meet, and now he wanted me to take this lovely woman to her apartment in the suburbs. At that moment, I didn't care about his reasons. I didn't want to turn down a nice offer. "I don't mind at all," I replied, looking at Chris. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I live in Wheeling, which is a good 45 minutes away." "No problem at all," I said as we all headed for the door. The first few minutes in the car were filled with light conversation until Chris turned her head toward me. "George was right about you," she said. "Right about me? I don't get it. What was he right about?" "You're a really nice guy," she said with a smile. "I haven't met many nice guys lately. My last boyfriend was unfaithful, and when I confronted him, we broke up." "He cheated on you?" "Yes," Chris replied. "I think he was seeing more than one person. I was venting to George about it, saying I didn't think there were any decent guys left in this city. He mentioned that he knew someone and asked if I wanted to meet him." "So that's why you came to see me, huh?" I thought. "Yep, I wanted to meet the nice guy from Chicago," she said with a smile. "And here you are." I learned long ago that if you like someone, it's good to ask them questions and listen to their answers. Chris enjoyed modeling. She did hand and foot modeling, as well as some work with fancy clothes. Besides working with George whenever he could, she also had a few other jobs, including one with DeVries, a well-known jewelry shop in the city. By the time we arrived at her apartment, it was getting quite late. "What time do you have to be at work tomorrow?" she asked. "Not until 10, I replied after thinking for a moment. "Good," she said. stepping closer with a small smile. She glanced at my shirt and looked back at me. Then let's get comfortable. I couldn't believe how quickly things were moving. My mind reminded me to take it slow since I had only known her for a little while. But my excitement was hard to ignore. Honestly, I was more thrilled just being near this stunning woman than anything else. Before long, I found myself in a warm moment of connection. She laughed and swayed a bit, enjoying the situation. "You're really good at this," she said playfully. "Come here," she invited. As I moved closer, she reached out to pull me in. "Are you on the pill?" I asked nervously. With a smile, she replied, "Yes, I am. Thanks for checking." "Stop being so nice," she said firmly. I didn't need any more encouragement. As we got closer, I could feel the connection between us growing stronger. She let out a soft breath as we moved together, and I knew this moment wouldn't last long. Her touch alone nearly overwhelmed me, but I managed to hold back just a little longer. Her voice filled the air, urging me on, and I responded, moving with more purpose. Her body reacted as we shared the moment, and everything seemed to build toward a peak. Soon I felt the tension rising, and her expression showed she was feeling the same. With one final intense moment, we both reached the height of our emotions, and everything came to a powerful close. I collapsed on the bed beside her, both of us catching our breath in the quiet. Chris was the first to speak. "You're not only kind," she said with a soft smile, "but you're also full of surprises." "Chris," I replied, still trying to steady my breathing, "anyone who isn't moved by your beauty must not be alive, and I certainly am." She turned toward me, gently touching my lips with her finger. Smiling, she lightly brushed her thumb over my lips before kissing me. I hadn't let anyone in for a long time since Tanya. Losing her had made me afraid of opening my heart again, fearing the pain of loss. But as I looked into Chris's eyes, I realized I was about to let someone in again. There was no denying it. After a few quiet moments together, Chris got up and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the water running, and before long, she returned with a warm cloth. She gently wiped me down with care, something no one had ever done for me before. I knew in return I would do the same for her next time. She climbed back onto the bed, and we shared a simple, tender moment of connection, one that said more than words ever could. She gently placed her hand on me and moved with care, knowing just how to create a moment of connection. She paused and looked into my eyes. "Ready for another go?" she asked with a playful smile. Still feeling the warmth of the moment, I nodded and closed my eyes, managing a simple, "Yeah." Chris moved closer, positioning herself gently. With her hands resting on my chest, she started to move slowly, our rhythm in sync. I placed my hands on her waist, helping her along with each movement. She closed her eyes and tilted her head back, the pace naturally quickening as we shared this moment together. I could hear the soft creaking of the bed as we shared an intimate moment. "I'm almost there," I whispered, feeling the buildup of emotion. "Me too," she replied, her voice full of warmth. Suddenly, a powerful sensation washed over me, and I sat up, wrapping my arms around Chris just as she too felt the same rush of emotions. We both rested side by side, smiling and laughing quietly at how exhausted we felt. "I know it's a silly question to ask," Chris said softly, "but did you enjoy it? Because I sure did." I smiled and kissed her. "I can't think of anything better." "What time do you need to leave in the morning?" she asked. "I should be out by 7, I replied. "Enough time to get home, shower, and change." "Okay, I'll set the alarm for 6, she said with a playful smile. "We'll have some time before you go." We cuddled up and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we shared another quiet moment before I left. Chris asked if I could come back that night, and I did for many nights after. Chris and I began to spend all our free time together. We became a couple and were starting to fall in love. 6 months went by in a flash. I knew how I felt about Chris. I felt so open and exposed. I hadn't felt this way since my last relationship with Tanya. The thing was, we hadn't actually said those important 3 words to each other. Did we really need to say them, or could we just understand how we felt? I was scared to say them first. What if she didn't feel the same way? One of the great things about working at the newspaper was our changing work schedule. Every 3 months, we got a long weekend of 3 days. We would work on Friday until about 5 o'clock, then have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. We didn't need to return to work until 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. My long weekend was coming soon, and I had something special planned. I asked Chris if she had ever visited Door County, Wisconsin. I knew she hadn't because George mentioned that it was a place she always wanted to see but never had the chance. When I asked if she could clear her schedule and join me for the weekend, she was excited. By the time we arrived in Ephraim, our destination, it was too late to do much except check into our motel and get a good night's sleep. The next day, however, was full of fun activities. We found a charming little restaurant that served the best eggs and sausage either of us had ever tasted. From there, we explored antique shops, art galleries, and wineries. We walked along the waterfront, arm in arm, watching the waves of Lake Michigan crash against the ancient rocks along the shore. Later that evening, we enjoyed a lovely dinner at a restaurant in town that everyone highly recommended. All night, I tried to hide my nervousness. I knew I had an important question to ask that night, one that would shape not just the evening, but possibly the rest of my life. Once we returned to our room, we both felt the need to freshen up. She stepped into the shower first, and I followed close behind. We shared the warm water, and as I helped lather her back, a quiet connection passed between us. Chris leaned against the wall of the shower, and we moved together, feeling the closeness deepen with every moment. Our movements matched, and the sense of togetherness grew stronger as the water continued to fall around us. I held her close, feeling a deep connection between us. Chris was filled with joy, like a child enjoying a fun day. We dried off and then jumped into bed together. I lay down and felt a rush of excitement. Without hesitation, Chris leaned in close. She did everything she could to make me feel good, and it drove me to the edge of happiness. Before long, I was with her again, lost in the moment, both of us feeling overwhelmed with joy. After a little rest, we began again. But this time, I wanted to take it slow and savor every moment. I gently held her head in my arm and kissed her softly. She let out a happy sound as I traced my fingers along the sensitive parts of her neck and shoulders, cherishing every ounce of joy we shared. She stretched and let out a soft sound as I gently touched her. I moved down her stomach, feeling the smoothness of her skin. I made her feel joy again and again before finally holding her close. I moved with a deep feeling that came from my heart. By 2 in the morning, we were both tired. We lay together, our bodies close. I knew it was time to ask her something important. "Honey?" "Uh-huh," she replied sleepily. "I need to know. You've never said anything. Do you love me?" Chris turned to me, resting on her elbow, and looked into my eyes. "Yes, I love you very much." That was all I needed to move forward with my plans. I smiled and kissed her. "I love you too, sweetie, but I think you already knew that." On Sunday morning, we woke up early. Everything around us was so lovely, and we wanted to make the most of the time we had left. Today was going to be a day for pictures. I grabbed my camera and we set off to enjoy a day filled with exciting adventures. Together, we explored old caves, climbed tall mountains, and looked at art made by Native Americans 300 years ago. After a long day, we went back to our motel room to freshen up and put on nicer clothes for a fun evening of eating and dancing. As the night went on, I worried Chris might be too tired for my next idea. However, when I suggested going down to the water to enjoy the view of the full moon, she smiled and agreed. We changed into warm, cozy outfits and strolled to a small bench outside our room. As we sat close together, the gentle waves of Lake Michigan rolled onto the sandy shore nearby. Chris turned to me and with a warm kiss said, "This is really nice. Thank you for this weekend." I smiled. She didn't realize how perfectly things were going for me. "You're very welcome," I replied, returning her kiss. "You know, I was watching TV the other night when a commercial for DeVry's Jewelers came on. I saw a lovely hand like yours with a beautiful ring, and I felt so proud to think, I know the person who wears that ring." Chris smiled as I took her left hand. Then, before she realized what I was doing, I slipped a diamond ring onto her finger. "Those commercials are missing one thing," I said as I got down on one knee. "Chris, I never thought I could feel this way again, but being with you means everything to me, and I want it to last forever. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she just looked at the ring, surprised. The silence felt heavy, and I felt butterflies in my stomach. The sand was damp, and I felt my jeans getting wet. I worried that I had messed things up. Finally, with tears on her cheeks, Chris looked up at me. She gazed at the ring on her finger and then into my concerned eyes. "Yes!" she shouted, wrapping her arms around my neck. "Oh, my love, yes, yes, yes!" She jumped off the bench just as I was standing up and we both tumbled back. I lost my balance and fell into the chilly water with Chris landing softly on top of me. "Are you okay?" Chris asked, giggling a little. I smiled, wrapped my wet arms around her and pulled her in for a sweet kiss. We hugged as the waves of Lake Michigan washed over us. On March 1st of the next year, we got married in a small church in a charming village in Illinois, just north of the city. Our wedding looked like a scene from a beautiful painting, with family and friends celebrating the joy of our special day. After a lovely time in the Virgin Islands, we returned home and began building our life together. Since Chris had a much larger apartment than my small place in the city, I moved in with her and became part of the suburban community. Adjusting to married life was easy. Her friends became my friends, and my friends became hers. Life was wonderful and getting even better. Each year, the Illinois Press Photographers Association holds an awards show and a banquet. Photographers from all over the state enter their best work for judging. I had participated for years but hadn't won much. This year felt different. Perhaps my work was better because I was in love. I ended up winning first place in 3 categories, second place in one, and third in another. I was only 2 points away from being named Photographer of the Year. Even so, winning so many awards that year led to a significant raise at the newspaper. I planned to take Chris out for dinner to celebrate, but she had a different idea. That night, she met me at the door with her usual warm welcome. Chris wrapped her arms around my neck and gave me a long kiss. "Wow," she said. "You kiss really well for an old married guy." "I'll show you just how old I am," I replied playfully. "I want to celebrate my raise by giving you a wonderful evening." She laughed. And little did I know she had her own plans in mind, but with a twist. "Sounds great to me," she said with a big smile. "But before that, I made something special for dinner." "Oh, sweetheart, I thought we could go out tonight. Somewhere nice and romantic." "No need, dear. I have everything ready here," she replied while looking into my eyes. That's when I noticed the soft light from the candles. I looked around at the cozy setting. She had put a lot of effort into making this evening special. I wondered what I did to deserve such a wonderful wife. "Are you sure dinner can't wait?" I asked with a playful smile. Chris lightly tapped my arm. "Are you serious? After I've been working hard in the kitchen all day, absolutely not. Go make yourself a drink and relax. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. "I must admit," I said, "something smells really good." And it was delicious. Trout almondine, just how I liked it. After a lovely candlelit dinner, Chris brought out some after-dinner wine and we settled on the couch for some relaxation. "So," Chris began, "are you feeling a bit adventurous tonight?" "Darling, I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to spend time with my beautiful wife. Honestly, I was going to take you out, but that trout was as good as anything at a restaurant. Thank you for the wonderful meal. Now how about we enjoy some time together?" "You sure know how to make a girl feel special," Chris said with a smile. "I'm happy to be close with you, but there's something I need to talk about first." I gazed into her eyes. They were so clear and bright, it seemed like I could almost understand what she was feeling. This felt important. "Of course, dear. Is something on your mind?" "No, dear, not at all. I want to be with you, but first, I want to ask if you think I should stop taking my pill. I haven't taken it today, and I'm thinking about stopping for good." I probably looked puzzled. "Dear, I want to have a child. I want to start a family." "What do you think?" There was no way to hide my happiness. My eyes filled with tears of joy. I almost spilled her wine as I hugged her and showered her with kisses. "I love you so much," I said. "No one has ever loved someone like I love you." She kissed me back with the same warmth. "I love you too, my dear. Shall we lie down and think about starting a family?" I picked her up, something I hadn't done since our honeymoon, and carried her to the bedroom. I gently laid her down and reached behind her neck to untie the string of her lovely dress. As I carefully slipped it off, I realized she had chosen not to wear anything underneath. She looked up at me with excitement as I took off my own clothes and joined her in bed. We turned to face each other and kissed. For me, being close was always something special. It was the deepest way to show my love. It was a special moment shared between two people committed to one another. It represented my promise to love and cherish her forever. That night, my heart felt so proud and full. I already felt like a father as I hoped for our future together. Almost 3 months passed before Chris visited the doctor. Before cell phones, if you wanted to reach someone on the go, like a newspaper photographer, you used a beeper. When mine went off and I saw our doctor's number, I quickly pulled over and used a payphone to call. The receptionist answered. Then I heard her call for Chris and tell her I was on the line. "Honey," Chris said with excitement, "you're going to be a father." My heart raced with joy. I was so surprised I could hardly speak. I just stood there with the phone to my ear. "Hi, are you there? Did you hear me? You're going to be a daddy." Yeah, I heard you. I just can't talk right now. I can't believe it. I'm really going to be a dad. You're going to be a mom, and we're going to be a family. Oh my gosh." I felt tears forming in my eyes. "I love you so much." I was feeling very emotional, and Chris could hear it on the line. "I love you too," she replied. "You're going to be a wonderful dad, just like you are a great husband. Listen, I have a couple more tasks to finish, and then I'll be done for the day. I'll see if they can let me leave a bit early. How about a nice dinner tonight? I still owe you one. You pick the place, anywhere you want." "My love, you're on the same page as me. How about that little Italian restaurant on Sheridan Road by the lake?" "I'll make the reservations as soon as I get back to the office," I said. We said our happy goodbyes, and I stopped by for some cigars on my way. Later that night, we enjoyed a lovely Italian dinner. We held hands across the candle-lit table and shared gentle smiles. After dinner, we sipped some wine and watched as a big yellow moon rose over Lake Michigan. Our waiter asked if we were newlyweds. I said no, but I felt so proud as I shared the news that we were going to be parents for the first time. He congratulated us and then surprised us a few minutes later with a special dessert, Cherry's Jubilee, on the house. 9 months later, after walking back and forth in the waiting room for more than 4 hours, a nurse came in and announced that my daughter was born. She led me into the recovery room to see Chris and our new little one. Chris's hair was messy from the hard work, and I could see she was very tired. She wore no makeup and was in a hospital gown, but she looked more beautiful than ever. She lay with our baby in her arms, a big smile lighting up her face. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. "We did well." "Yes, we did. She's beautiful, just like her mother." "Would you like to hold your daughter?" the nurse asked with a warm smile. "Can I?" I replied. The nurse carefully lifted little Brea and placed her in my arms. My heart filled with joy and my eyes became misty with happy tears. I had never felt such happiness. It seemed contagious because my wife and the nurse were also shedding tears of joy. Our apartment was big enough for the 3 of us, so we didn't need to rush into buying a house. That changed a 1.5 years later when Brea's sister arrived. We became a family of 4, and I felt incredibly lucky. Still, the space was becoming tight. A few months after Catherine, our second child, was born, we began our search for a new home. As soon as we started our search, we understood it wouldn't be easy to find a home that was big enough for our growing family and still fit our budget. After a long day of work, I was feeling uncertain about ever finding a place we could afford. I walked into the photography office and was suddenly met with a bright flash of light. I stopped and blinked, trying to figure out what had just happened. Then I heard a voice say, "Now you know how those on the other side of the camera feel." Once the spots in my vision faded, I saw a group of my coworkers gathered around. "Surprise!" I heard someone shout from the crowd. I looked around, hoping to find someone who could explain what was going on. "Our team filled me in, my friend," said Terry, a fellow photographer. "Today marks your 10th anniversary here." "Happy anniversary!" everyone shouted as Jenny, the office assistant, came over with a cake topped with 10 candles. It seemed like there was going to be a party, so I thought I should call Chris and let her know I would be home late. When I spoke with her, she asked how late I would be. When I said about an hour, she said that was fine, but to try not to be much later because George was at the house and wanted to talk to me about something. I had a great time at the party and walked into the house feeling cheerful. Whether or not we had guests, Chris welcomed me with her usual warmth. "I waited for you to start dinner, honey. George will join us if that's all right. Oh, and one more thing," she said. giving me a friendly squeeze and a quick kiss. "Happy anniversary, honey. I wish I'd known earlier." "Honestly, I didn't know either until the party," I said. I walked into the living room. "Hi, George. How's it going?" "Just fine," he replied. "I hear congratulations are in order. Can you believe it's been 10 years? Wow, time really flies when you're enjoying yourself, doesn't it, my friend?" At that moment, Chris called us to dinner. As usual, she took care of feeding Catherine while I helped Brea eat. George got his own meal. After dinner, Chris took the girls for their bath and got them ready for bed. George wanted to have a chat with me, so I grabbed us a couple of drinks and sat down on the couch. "Brent, do you know Don Del Nato? He has a small photography studio near Ohio Street." "Yeah, I've seen the studio when I drove by, but I don't know him personally. Why do you ask?" "Because he's selling his studio, and I think you should consider buying it." "What?" I was surprised that George thought I should buy a studio. I was a photographer. "Brent, listen to me for a second. We send some of our small product photography to this place. I bet we pay him close to $100,000 a year for handling the work we can't get to." I didn't know much about running a studio, but the $100,000 a year caught my interest. George continued, "Del Nato has a brother in Vegas who is very unwell. Don wants to sell the studio and go care for him. I spoke to him the other day, and you could buy that place for a low price. Don just wants to leave and is ready to sell everything for what the equipment is worth." "George, I doubt I can afford that. How much is the equipment valued at?" $40,000, he replied. "George, we're trying to buy a house right now. There's no way I could gather that kind of money." "Brent, the house can wait a little longer. I'm telling you, if you let this opportunity pass, you'll regret it for a long time." Just then, Chris came out from putting the girls to bed. She had a small smile on her face. "So what do you think, honey?" she asked. "Think about what?" I replied. "Well," George hesitated, "maybe I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help telling Chris about the studio." "Brent, you really can't just ignore this," Chris said. "What's your take on it?" I asked, looking at him. "I think it's up to you, dear, but I overheard something about the house when I was leaving the bedroom. If you're worried about buying it, don't be. This apartment has been great for us, and it will keep being good. You need to follow your feelings and instincts. Remember, whatever choice you make, I will support you fully. I believe in you. I believe you can achieve anything you want, so whatever you choose, you will have our family's love and support all the way." Wow, I thought as I listened in surprise to Chris. Could this really happen? After 10 years of driving around the city at all hours, sometimes going into risky areas at night for work, it would be nice to have regular hours and work from one place for a change. I glanced at George, who was smiling at me. Then I looked back at Chris, who sat down next to me and put her arm around my shoulder. It made me realize how quickly things could change. I was 28 years old. I had only ever worked in press photography, and now I was thinking about starting a new career. It was a bit frightening, but with George's support and my wife's encouragement, I felt hopeful. "George," I said, looking back at him, "I'm not making any big moves yet, but I would like to talk to this person. I need to ensure that any lease agreement they have is solid, and I want to know how long it lasts. I also need to be sure that I won't end up with a lot of debt. All unpaid bills need to be settled before I can take the keys." "Brent, my friend," George said, putting his hand on my knee as he stood up, "I'll arrange a meeting for you with Don. He's a great guy. I've worked with him for years. I believe you'll find it easy to agree with him. He's very trustworthy. I'll give you a call on Monday or Tuesday. You can meet at the studio and check it out while you're there." After saying goodbye to George, Chris and I settled onto the couch, holding each other close. Chris understood that I had a lot on my mind. "You know what you need," she said. "I know what I'd like to do," I replied with a smile. I didn't have to explain further. Chris understood my thoughts. "First," she said, "you need to relax in a nice warm bath. I'll be here to help you unwind. After your bath, you can lie down on the bed and I'll give you a massage. I'll work on those tense muscles of yours until you feel calm and loose. Then we can enjoy a serene evening together. How does that sound?" "Sounds great. When do we start?" I asked with excitement. "Right now," she said, standing up and gently taking my hand to lead me to the bedroom. Chris did everything she promised and more. Later that night, she settled into my arms, looking very content. A few minutes later, we both fell into a calm sleep. If Chris's enjoyable night was meant to make me feel adventurous, it succeeded. By the time George arranged the meeting between Dawn and me, I was pretty sure I wanted to go for it. As long as there were no surprises and everything seemed fine, and as long as I could get a business loan, Del Natto's photo studio would soon have a new sign out front. And so, Brent's Commercial Photography came to be. Not once since I unlocked the new front door had I regretted my choice. In the first few weeks, George would send me some work during the day, then come by after hours to teach me how to set up the lights and take photos. Before long, I was taking photos on my own without George's help. I worked hard and even surprised him with some new lighting ideas I had picked up myself. I sent my older cameras to the factory to be fixed and updated. In my first year, I earned over $125,000. By the end of my second year, I was making $200,000, and by the end of my third year, I had reached over $250,000. With all this work, I found it hard to manage everything by myself. So I hired someone to help me in the office. She scheduled appointments, managed the finances, and assisted in general tasks. My landlord began to regret not raising my rent earlier. He had kept it low to help the previous tenant, Del Natto, who wasn't doing well. Now he realized the space was worth much more. I reminded him that I still had 2 years left on my lease. Then I spotted a chance for both of us. There were 3 rooms in the back of my studio that he was using for storage. I offered him a deal. If he cleaned those rooms out, I would rent them for an extra $400 a month. He was very happy to accept my offer. He received a rent increase, and I gained space to grow my business. Next, I needed to hire another photographer. He was a young guy who had just finished college with a master's degree in photography. He still had a lot to learn, but he picked things up quickly. I was sure he would learn everything I could show him, and eventually, he might start his own business and take some of my clients with him. That often happened in this line of work. In the following years, things became more stable. The business had settled into a steady routine, and we were in a good financial place. I wasn't thinking about expanding for the time being. My personal life was also calming down a bit. About a year after we bought the studio, we found our dream home. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath Victorian on a large lot. The moment Chris and I saw it, we knew it was the perfect place to raise our family. I spent around 10 hours a day at the studio while Chris was doing a wonderful job taking care of our kids. Both Brea and Catherine were now in school, and I could tell that the quiet house was starting to weigh on Chris. Our bond had always been strong, but lately, it felt less intense. After 9 years of marriage and 2 kids, I guess changes are expected. In 5 months, we would celebrate our 10th anniversary, and I had a plan to reignite our connection. Each year, we took a little vacation, but it was always with the kids. We enjoyed those trips, but this time, I wanted a nice, romantic getaway just for the 2 of us. I could picture us in the Virgin Islands. When we went there for our honeymoon, we rented a cozy cottage behind the hotel. It had a living room, a bedroom, and a small kitchen, and it was just a short walk to the beautiful blue waters of the Caribbean. That was almost 10 years ago. The hotel had changed owners twice since then, and I didn't even know if the small hut was still there. After a few hours and many phone calls, I found out the new name of the hotel and learned that the little hut was still standing and still available for rent. I quickly booked it for the week of March 1st the next year. Now all I had to do was plan for the kids during that week. I really didn't want to leave them with my parents. As he got older, my dad had very little patience left and would end up yelling at them the whole time they were there. No, my parents were not an option. That left Chris's mom and stepdad, but they lived in Colorado. I wondered if they would be okay with coming to Chicago for the week. I called them and asked them to keep it a secret from Chris before I asked if they would be willing to help watch the kids. Since they lived so far away, they didn't see their grandkids very often and were excited about the idea. My plan was starting to come together. I wanted to surprise Chris with a second honeymoon, so I was really nervous for the next few months, hoping her parents wouldn't accidentally let it slip, especially around Christmas. They came to visit us for 3 days, but thankfully never mentioned a word about my surprise. I was hoping the holidays would lift Chris's mood, but as soon as they were over, she went back to feeling down. Our relationship was struggling, and I couldn't wait for March to come. On February 27th, I set my plan in motion. I had arranged for a limo to pick up Chris's parents at O'Hare Airport and bring them straight to our house. A little after 7 in the evening, our doorbell rang. Chris's expression was amazing when she saw her mom and stepdad standing on our porch with bags. "Hi, sweetie," said Greg, the man Chris had called Dad since she was little. "We were nearby and thought we'd come for a visit." Chris jumped with joy and hugged them both tightly. "Oh my gosh," I said. "Shouldn't we invite them inside?" "Yes, of course," she replied. "I'm just so surprised to see you. Please come in." "Gad," said Chris, still hugging everyone. "It's so nice to see you." The kids who were upstairs heard the excitement and hurried down to see what was happening. When they saw Grandma and Grandpa, they greeted them with joy. It took a little while for everyone to settle down. I could see Chris was bursting with questions, but we were still in the middle of the warm welcome. Once the initial excitement faded, I brought out some snacks and drinks for everyone. "How did you get from the airport?" Chris asked. I knew she had a lot on her mind. "Brent sent a car for us," said Audrey, Chris's mother. "Brent did?" Chris looked at me, curious. "You knew they were coming and didn't tell me." "Sweetheart, if I had said anything, it would have spoiled the surprise," I replied. Chris smiled at her parents. "Oh, of course. You're here for our anniversary." She got up from the couch, wrapped her arms around my neck, and gave me a quick kiss. I heard the kids groan playfully. "Yes, that's right," I said after she pulled back. I looked into her eyes and smiled. "But we won't be here for our anniversary." For a moment, I thought I saw a look of worry in her eyes, but I knew it was just more questions. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the airline tickets. "Happy anniversary," I said, handing them to her. She looked at them, gasping and covering her mouth in surprise. "Honey, are we really going back to the Virgin Islands?" she asked, her eyes shining with happy tears. "Yes, my dear," I replied, feeling emotional too. "Your parents will watch the kids while we relax on the beach in St. Thomas, just like we did for our honeymoon." In that moment, I think Chris forgot about everything else. She leaped into my arms, wrapping her arms around my neck and her legs around my waist. Then she covered my face with sweet kisses. That was exactly what I was hoping for. I had my Chris back. St. Thomas was even better this time than it was 10 years ago. For one thing, we had more money to spend. Even though the hotel had a new owner, it hadn't changed much. We enjoyed our dinners at the same outdoor restaurant and fed the iguanas with leftover food. During the day, we explored the many shops scattered around town. We hiked in the mountains, swam in the ocean, and took pictures of all the historical sites. One spot Chris loved was a beautiful old tree, so ancient that it could have seen Sir Francis Drake himself standing on the high bluff and waiting for a ship to pass by. In the evenings, we relaxed at our favorite outdoor bar right on the beach, sipping pina coladas as the warm, tropical waters touched our toes at high tide. We enjoyed our time together, feeling more connected than ever. I was so happy to have my wife back, eager to share every moment with her. On our last night, after a couple of Mai Tais, we returned to our hut, cherishing every second together. Before I took off my own clothes, I gently helped Chris remove hers, slowly unbuttoning each button and unzipping every zipper. Once we were lying down, my wife and I faced each other and looked into each other's eyes. For a moment, I thought I noticed a strange look on her face, maybe even a hint of worry, but I quickly dismissed the thought. What could Chris possibly feel worried about? She closed her eyes as I softly kissed her in those special places that made her smile. I knew I wouldn't be able to speak much the next day, but that didn't matter. I was focused on bringing Chris joy again and again with my special abilities. Several times that night, I felt a little discomfort, but it was nothing to worry about thanks to Chris. We felt like kids, enjoying each other's company. We didn't care about the time, we only cared about our connection. When we finally relaxed, we lay in each other's arms and shared gentle kisses to say goodnight. A little while later, we both laughed as sunlight streamed in through the bedroom window. It was time to wake up. As Chris watched the island get smaller from her window seat, she squeezed my hand and a tear ran down her cheek. "We'll come back," I said to lift her spirits, "and it won't take us another 10 years. It's true what they say about traveling. No matter how wonderful the trip, it always feels good to be home." We felt that when we pulled into our driveway. The kids noticed we were back first and rushed out to greet us with hugs and kisses. The grandparents were just inside the door, smiling widely. It seemed everyone had a great week. Once we got inside, we enjoyed another round of warm welcomes and hugs. Of course, we had gifts for everyone, and both Catherine and Brea were thrilled with their seashell jewelry. Chris put a lovely necklace made of precious stones around her mother's neck. I also gave Greg a nice gold watch. I won't mention how much I spent on Chris that day because it was our special anniversary. The next day, we drove Chris's parents to the airport, thanking them deeply for their visit. After that, life went back to its usual pace, except for our loving moments together, which remained just as warm and happy as they had been during our time on the island. For the past 5 years, we had taken care of our neighborhood's 4th of July party. We had a nice grill and a good-sized backyard, so we didn't mind at all. Chris really enjoyed sending out the invitations and always had some fun idea. I remember one day in late April when I came home a bit early. Chris was cooking with her back to the door and didn't hear me come in. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table with the list of people she planned to invite to the party. I quietly looked at the names. "You forgot Rita and Jerry," I said. Chris jumped, surprised. "I'm sorry, honey," I added with a chuckle. "I didn't mean to startle you." Chris was catching her breath, her hand on her heart. "You scared me, Brent. Please don't sneak up on me like that." "I'm really sorry," I said. Chris came over, smiling after her surprise, and gave me my usual hug and kiss. As she walked back to the stove, she casually closed her laptop. "You forgot Jerry and Rita Anderson," I reminded her. "You can't forget Jerry. He's the life of the party." I noticed a bit of worry in Chris's voice. "They can't come this year," she said. "They're going away that weekend." I genuinely felt bad to hear that. Jerry was Chris's friend first, but he was also a good friend of mine and always made us laugh. "Oh, that's too bad," I replied. "Jerry always brings so much joy. Do you remember the Christmas party a few years ago? He walked around all night with mistletoe clipped to his belt. I didn't think much of it until the next month. I was at the golf course with the 3 friends I usually played with. We had all known each other for years. "Hey, did you hear about Rita and Jerry Anderson?" Gary asked. "They moved to Phoenix or somewhere like that." "What?" I replied. I knew he must be wrong. Jerry had worked at the airport for over 20 years. He really liked his job and had no plans to leave. "No way. Jerry wouldn't just quit and move. You must have heard wrong. Chris has known Jerry for 15 years. He wouldn't leave without saying goodbye to her." "I'm telling you," Gary insisted. "They're gone. I heard they were having issues. I think Jerry was seeing someone else, but I'm not sure." "Come on," I said. "Jerry cheating on Rita? No way. All I know, Brent, is that they're gone. I heard Jerry took early retirement and the house is already sold. It's all done." I still couldn't believe it. Then I remembered Chris saying they would be out of town for our party. "When did they move?" I asked. "About mid-March," Gary replied. Mid-March? It was almost the end of April when Chris and I talked about the guest list for our barbecue. She must have known they had moved by then. I wondered why she didn't just tell me instead of saying they would be out of town for our gathering. Something felt off. Was Chris keeping something from me? As far as I knew, she had never lied to me or made me doubt her. Maybe I was overthinking it, I thought as I stepped up to the 3rd tee and hit a great shot right down the middle. I didn't think about it again until the day of the party. There were about 60 people gathered at our house, including friends, family, neighbors, and all the kids. As always, I ended up taking care of the grill while Chris moved around, making sure everyone was happy. I was running low on hamburger buns, so I had to hurry inside to get some more. I opened the kitchen cabinet and was searching for more buns when I heard my wife talking with her friend Jan on the other side of the wall. "So what did Rita say to you?" I heard Jan ask. "Shh," my wife said, lowering her voice so I could barely hear her. "She told me she would be really angry if she ever saw me again." What did I just hear? Rita and Chris were friends. Why would Rita want to be so upset? This didn't make sense. I wasn't a detective, but I could tell something was wrong. I quietly took the buns and left. I needed to think. I had to find out what was happening. It didn't take long. By the time I got back to the grill, I could only think of one explanation, and I didn't like it. First, Chris had told me they would be out of town. She must have known by then that they had actually moved. Then I heard that Jerry was not being faithful to Rita, and now Chris was saying Rita was upset. It all added up. Chris and Jerry had likely been involved with each other. Suddenly, my stomach felt uneasy. I almost lost my lunch on the burgers. I called out to anyone nearby to please watch the grill while I went inside for a bit. I walked right past Chris and Jan, who were still talking in the dining room. I must have looked unwell because Chris asked if I was okay. I just mumbled and headed straight for the bathroom. Chris followed me to the door and heard me being sick. "Brent, are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "Are you okay, dear?" "I'm fine," I called from behind the door. "I just have a bit of a stomach ache. I'll be all right soon." I could sense her worry, but I asked her to go back to our guests. I promised her I would feel better shortly. As I dealt with my discomfort and the tears that came, I lost track of how long I had been in there. Finally, I washed my face and tried to look decent again. When I came out, Chris was waiting outside the door. Just then, Jan came over too. "Is he okay?" Jan asked. "I don't know," Chris replied, looking worried as she stared at my face. "Honey, are you all right? Is your stomach bothering you?" I think I was a bit short with her. "I said I'll be fine. You should go take care of our guests," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Chris and Jan exchanged worried looks, as if they were wondering if I knew something. "Okay, honey," Chris said, still looking anxious. She and Jan went back into the party through the kitchen. I wasn't ready to face anyone yet, so I went to our bedroom to think. I sat on the edge of the bed and buried my face in my hands. I had to be mistaken, I thought. I'm not a detective. I must be jumping to the wrong conclusion. There is no way Chris would be unfaithful to me, especially not with Jerry. He was funny, almost like a clown, but definitely not a romantic hero. No, this must be a big misunderstanding. Tonight, after everyone leaves and the kids are asleep, I'll talk to Chris. I'm sure she'll help clear this up. Once I convinced myself that I was wrong, I actually felt a little better and returned to the party. As soon as Chris saw me, she came over and put her arm around me. "Are you sure you're okay, sweetheart?" she asked again, leaning in to give me a soft kiss on the cheek. "I'll be fine," I replied, this time smiling a little more. The party went on until late, with the last guests leaving around 10:30. After a long day, Catherine and Brea fell asleep as soon as their heads touched the pillows. I suggested we should get some rest too, since we had a lot to tidy up the next day. I could tell Chris was feeling worried. I followed her into our bedroom and could tell something was wrong. She noticed my mood, but didn't know what was troubling me. I stood behind her as she sat at her dressing table, taking off her earrings. "Why would Rita Anderson want to hurt you?" I asked directly. She paused, looking at me in the mirror. She seemed unsure of how to respond. Then I saw tears in her eyes, and I realized it was true. "There's only one reason another woman would want to hurt someone," I said, my voice firm. "A couple of months ago, you said they couldn't come to our party because of other plans. Then I found out they moved. Gary mentioned that Jerry was involved with someone else, and today I heard you tell Jan that Rita wanted to hurt you. Please, Chris, tell me the other woman isn't you." Chris started to cry. I felt a wave of shock and sat down on the edge of the bed, unable to move. This can't be real, I thought. My whole world felt lost. I was the first to gather my thoughts. "I'm not staying here tonight," I said, my voice filled with anger as I grabbed a pillow from the closet. "I'll sleep on the couch. I'm not sure how this will all turn out, Chris. I really don't know if I can handle it. I've never felt so hurt by anyone in my life, especially not by someone who says they love me." "I do love you," Chris said through tears. "Really?" I replied, my voice filled with doubt. "Just stay up there. I don't want to see you tonight." With that, I stormed out of the room and headed downstairs. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get to sleep. After tossing and turning for a long time, I decided to take a walk. I lost track of time, probably a couple of hours. When I returned, Chris was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "I saw you leave from the bedroom window," she said. "I wanted to have some coffee ready for you when you got back." I looked down at the floor and shook my head. I can't believe this. You hear about these things happening to others, but not to you, not to us. "Honey, don't say it didn't mean anything. Don't even think about it. It means everything. It means our marriage is broken. It means our happy home is no more. It means the woman who promised to love and cherish me didn't take those words seriously. Please, don't say it didn't matter." Chris held her head in her hands and started crying again. I felt terrible. Normally, seeing her like this would break my heart, but right now, I felt numb. I went upstairs and quickly packed a bag. I didn't look at her as I reached the bottom step and headed for the door. "I'm going to stay at the studio for a while. I don't know how long. You can clean this place up by yourself tomorrow. I don't care anymore." 3 days passed without hearing from anyone, then the phone at the studio rang. It doesn't have caller ID. "Brent's Commercial Photography," I said as I picked it up. There was a brief moment of silence. "Brent, it's Greg," said Chris's stepdad, and his voice sounded shaky as if he had been crying. "Hello, Greg," I replied with a heavy heart. "Son, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say other than that I truly feel for you." His voice started to tremble again. "Chris told you what happened?" "Yes, she shared everything with us, son. She said there was a mistake and you found out. This is hard for all of us, son. I just can't seem to process it." In the background, I could hear Chris's mother crying softly. I wondered if Chris realized how much pain she was causing the people who cared about her. Just then, I heard a familiar voice from inside the room. "Greg, where are you?" I asked. "We're at the house, son. We couldn't leave Chris by herself right now." "Just so you know, Brent, we don't agree with what Chris has done, but she is our daughter, and we thought it would be better for the kids this way." "How are the kids doing, Greg?" "Honestly, it's tough for them. Chris took all the blame and told the kids this was her fault, but they keep asking when their dad is coming home." Hearing about my kids hurt deeply. "Brent," Greg continued, "Chris wants to know if you would think about going to marriage counseling. I'm really asking you, please give it a try. I know you're hurting, but if there's any chance to fix things, I hope you will consider it." "Why didn't Chris ask me herself?" "She thought you might not want to talk to her," Greg said. "Have her call me with the details for when and where, and I'll be there." "Oh, thank you, Brent. You have no idea how much this means to all of us. I'll let her know to call you with everything." "Okay, Greg. I've got to go now. I have work to do." We said our goodbyes and hung up. After several days of trying to figure things out, I felt just as lost as the night I left. I didn't want to end our marriage, but I didn't know how to fix it either. I hoped that a marriage counselor could help us find a path forward. Less than 2 hours later, Greg called and Chris returned with a schedule. Her voice sounded so soft that I hardly recognized it. Our first session was set for the following Monday at 7 in the evening, just 4 days away. When I arrived at the counselor's office, Chris was already there. She looked really upset. Her usually beautiful hair was messy at the ends. Her eyes looked tired and red, with dark circles underneath. She held a tissue and her hands were trembling. I knew I should feel bad for her, but I didn't. I took a seat 2 chairs away from her. Our counselor, a kind older woman named Betty, introduced herself. She suggested we use first names to make things feel friendlier. Betty asked Chris to share how the relationship began and what it meant to her. Chris said it started off simple. While he worked nights, Jerry would stop by for coffee during the day, and they would joke and play around. One day, he playfully touched her. Instead of reacting strongly and telling him to leave, she joked back. Chris explained that Jerry was always so silly that it didn't really feel wrong to her. It was more like they were just having fun, like kids playing a game. There were never any deep feelings. They never talked about love or anything serious. Jerry acted like a clown, even pretending to celebrate after their time together. I tried to listen, but it was hard. This felt like a bad idea, and hearing Chris talk about this was only making me more upset. About 30 minutes into our conversation, I stood up. "Please stop," I said firmly. "I can't take any more of this." I looked directly at Chris when I spoke. "It's just not going to happen. No matter how much I care about you, we can't go back to how things were. Whenever I see you or even touch you, I think of Jerry. It feels like you've hurt me deeply." Chris looked at me with concern. Her voice shook a little. "I'm really sorry, Brent. I'm really, really sorry. I know you are, Chris, and I know you care about me. It's not just about trust. I really don't think you'd make this mistake again. It's the pain. I don't think I can ever get over the pain." "Sweetheart," her voice was strained from worry. "My dad said he could ask Jerry to apologize to you. Would that help? He said he'd try to reach out to him and get him to call you." "Jerry!" I felt my face getting hot. If you ever speak to him again, tell him to stay away from me. If he ever comes near me, he will regret it." I could see the surprise on Chris's face. She had never heard me speak about anyone in that way before. I continued, "I've never felt this way about anyone before. He took away my marriage, my happiness, my life, and my peace. If I thought I could get away with it, I wouldn't hesitate to confront him." By the look on Chris's face, I think she began to understand the impact of her choices. I was not the same person anymore. I turned and walked away. As I headed down the hall, I heard the therapist say, "I'm sorry, Chris. There's not much I can do. He's really hurting." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I knew I was struggling. My only chance was to get my phone from the house. I felt the cold wind getting stronger as the sun went down. My left side felt numb. I gathered all my strength to turn my body onto my stomach. I looked ahead. The 10 feet to the steps of the back porch seemed like a long way. I reached out with my hands, digging into the cold ground, trying to pull myself toward the house. I felt myself fading in and out of awareness. "Ooh, look how beautiful," I heard Sandy, my wife, say. Her voice was clear. "God is painting again, and I get to enjoy it with the man I love." Pushing aside the pain, my thoughts wandered back to a spring morning many years ago. The sun had just come up, and the birds were singing happily, ready for a day full of magic and wonder. It's strange, after separating from Chris, I thought time would stand still, but that was not the case. As the years passed, our daughters grew into lovely, smart young women. Through our children, Chris and I remained connected. I moved into a condo just a short distance away, and for many years, the girls spent weekends with me. Sometimes Chris would invite me over to help Brea or Catherine with their schoolwork or to fix things around the house, and I was always happy to help. Over the last 9 years, Chris asked a few times if we could get back together, but I knew that would never happen. I still cared for Chris, and I always would, but the hurt from her past actions lingered as well. It felt like love and pain coexisted in my heart, neither feeling able to overpower the other. On that Sunday morning, though, my mind was only on beating my 3 friends in a round of golf. I was on my way to meet them for our 7 a.m. tea time when I accidentally took the wrong turn. I didn't realize it then, but that wrong turn would change everything for me. My new convertible was just a month old, and it was the first day I could drive with the top down. With the wind in my hair and my golf clubs ready, I was enjoying my drive and didn't realize I had taken a wrong turn until I was a few miles down the road. "Oh no," I said to myself. "Focus, Brent, and pay attention." I turned left into the first driveway I saw so I could turn around. As I pulled in, I noticed a charming little Cape Cod-style house in front of me. A quick look at the messy yard told me the house was likely empty. What a pity, I thought. I shifted my car into reverse and turned my head to back out. That's when I spotted a for sale sign. I'm not sure why, but I felt drawn to it. I had a perfectly nice condo I had lived in for many years. I didn't need a house, yet something pushed me to grab a pen and write down the agent's name and number. When I met my friends at the golf course, all I could talk about was that adorable little house. One friend reminded me just before making a long putt that owning a house came with extra chores. I agreed. There was really no reason for me to buy a house. We took a break at the clubhouse for a cold drink before finishing our game. Once again, that strange feeling led me to the payphone in the hallway. I found myself dialing the number I had written down. "Hello," answered the agent. "This is Sandy." "Hi, Sandy," I said, suddenly remembering it was Sunday. "I'm calling about the little house for sale on Hurlitt's Drive, but maybe I should call you during the week." "No, that's fine," she said. "Are you interested in the house?" Honestly, I wasn't even searching for a house. I stumbled upon the house this morning and thought it might be nice to check it out. "Sir, may I—" "Oh, I'm sorry," I said. "Please call me Brent." "Okay, Brent, thank you. I was going to ask how many people will be living in the house. It's not very big, but you could finish the basement for more space." "Well, I don't have a family living with me," I replied. "I'm divorced and my 2 daughters live with their mother. I'm in a 3-bedroom condo right now, and from what I saw, I think this place might be bigger." "Okay, when would be a good time for you to meet at the house? I'd love to give you a tour. Out of all the houses we have, this one is my favorite," she said. "I really love it. If I could, I would buy it myself." I usually would think she was just trying to sell the house, but she sounded genuine. "Ah, getting together could be tricky." What are your hours? I work in the city and usually don't get home until after 7. Do you work weekends? Yes, I do. What are you up to right now, Brent? I'm at the golf course, I said. I can't leave until we finish playing. Could you stop by on your way home? I really wanted to see the house, but I was also curious about her, so I agreed to meet her there. When I drove into the driveway again, I noticed a little Honda Civic parked by the house. I parked behind it and watched Sandy step out of her car, and my heart raced. Since my divorce, I hadn't gone out much. I had a 6-month relationship, but there wasn't much connection between us, so I decided to end it. I guess I kept comparing every woman I met to Chris, and none of them measured up in any way. Chris seemed to be struggling even more. She hadn't gone on a single date since we broke up. I knew this for sure from our neighbors, mutual friends, and the girls. I told her it was okay to have fun and meet new people, but she was still holding on to hope that we might get back together someday. So, she focused on taking care of our daughters. Sandy reached out to shake my hand. The first thing that came to mind was how impressive she was. She looked elegant and friendly at the same time. I could easily get lost in her deep blue eyes, and her smile was so warm it could brighten anyone's day. After a few casual glances, I noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, which made my heart skip a beat. As she showed me around the house, I could tell she truly loved it, and her joy was infectious. Her face lit up as she guided me from room to room, highlighting all the things that made the place special. I thought I had seen everything, but Sandy saved the best for last. "So, what do you think?" she asked, her smile shining brightly. "I love it, I really do. When I saw it this morning, there was just something about this place that pulled me in," I replied. "Good. I really hoped you would like it. I don't know much about you yet, but I have a feeling you'd be very happy here." "Hold on," she said, taking my hand and walking towards the back door. "You haven't seen the best part yet." Sandy took me out to the back porch. It was a nice-sized wooden porch, but the best part was to the left of the door, a lovely swing that could fit 2 people, hanging from 4 sturdy chains above. "Come on," Sandy said excitedly. "Come and sit on the swing with me for a minute." You couldn't see it from the front, but the house was actually on a hill. Standing in the backyard, you could see trees in the distance, and to the right of them, a small lake shimmered. "I come here by myself sometimes and enjoy sitting in this swing, watching the beautiful sunsets over the lake," Sandy said. "It's so nice and quiet. The only thing that could make it better is some lovely music from a wind chime hanging over there." I already loved the house and knew I wanted to buy it, but sitting next to Sandy made me realize I had feelings for her too. "Well," I said playfully, "you can come over and sit on my swing anytime you want." She turned to me, looked into my eyes, and smiled softly. "I knew it," she said. "I could tell as soon as I saw you. This house and you seem to belong together." "So what should I do with my condo?" I asked. "Where is it?" "About 20 minutes south of here," I replied. "Well, if you have some time, I could check it out, take some notes, and help you sell it." "Don't you have someone you need to get back to?" I asked, curious. "No," she replied. "I'm divorced and have been for a long time. I do have a son, but he's in college now, so I have my own time. In that case, I'll make a deal with you." She looked at me, wondering what I meant. "When you're finished checking out my place and taking your notes, can I take you out to dinner?" She thought for a moment, but didn't take too long to respond. "Okay, it's a deal." While Sandy looked around my apartment and made notes, I quickly took a shower and got dressed. I wanted to take her somewhere special, but we had only just met a few hours ago. It didn't seem right for such a new connection, but I hoped we could enjoy that kind of evening someday. We decided to go to a cozy Italian restaurant that Sandy suggested. The food was good, but the conversation really caught my attention. Neither of us mentioned our ex-partners, but we spoke about our kids. I felt proud when I talked about my oldest daughter, Brea, who was 16 and would be starting her senior year in high school next year. Catherine, my 14-year-old, was also in high school and beginning to notice boys. Sandy shared that she had one son, Ron. He was a sophomore in college, studying to become an engineer. It was clear to everyone at the table that we both took pride in our children. The talk shifted to ourselves. Sandy asked what I did for work, and I could tell she was impressed when I told her I owned a photography studio. "Really? Wow, My son would love to meet you. Photography is his hobby, and he has loved it since he was little. If the chance comes this summer, maybe I could bring him downtown and you could show him your studio?" she asked. "It would make his summer unforgettable." "Sure," I replied. "Just let me know when you're coming, and I'll be ready for both of you." "Actually," she said a bit shyly, "please don't take this the wrong way, but I'm a little surprised. I guess you need a lot of creativity to do well in that area, but your place looks pretty plain and has simple furniture." "Yeah, I know," I replied, feeling a bit shy. "My daughters always tell me to add some color and more decorations. You're right, I'm really creative at work, but at home, I'm just a straightforward guy." "Well," Sandy said, "I took some interior design classes in college. I didn't study it enough to make it my job, but I do have a good sense of style. You know I really like that house, so if you want some advice now and then, just ask. I'd love to help." Wow, I thought. I know a good chance when I see one. "How much would you charge?" I asked. "Oh, I wouldn't charge you anything, Brent. That's silly," she replied. "No, I don't mean for just some advice. I want you to be my interior decorator. You can help with the whole house, even the basement. What do you think?" She looked surprised. "Brent, that's a nice offer, but I've never done a whole house before. I'm not sure I'd know where to start. No thanks. It's a nice offer, but I don't think I'm good enough." "Sandy, I saw the excitement in your eyes when you showed me around. You love that place just like I do. You have experience and training. I can't think of anyone else I'd prefer. Maybe we could even work on it together. Please, just think about it. It could be fun for both of us." Sandy promised to think it over. We talked a bit longer, but it was getting late, and we both had work the next day. After taking 2 cars, I walked Sandy to hers. I reached out to shake her hand. She took my hand, stepped a bit closer, and gave me a light kiss on the cheek. It surprised me, and I felt warmth in my face under the parking lot lights. She smiled and then drove off. In my life, only 2 people had ever made me feel so excited so quickly: Tanya, my high school sweetheart, and Chris. As I drove home, I thought about it. Was it just because it had been so long since I had a romantic connection, or was there something more? Did this mean Chris was someone special? For the next week, I worked with my banker to get my finances in order. I decided not to tell anyone about the house until everything was finalized. Sandy and I met a few times to take care of paperwork, but she always seemed very serious. I started to think that I misunderstood any signs I thought I saw during dinner. Everything went smoothly, and 30 days after I sat in the swing with Sandy, the house was mine. Well, mine and the bank's. I picked up the phone and called my daughter. Brea answered and sounded so grown up when she said hello. "Hi, sweetie. How's my girl?" I asked. "Hi, Dad. I'm great. I got an A on my history test today," she said excitedly. History was one of my favorite subjects, and she knew I would be happy to hear that. "That's amazing, honey. I'm so proud of you." We chatted a bit more about school, and then I told her my news. "I was wondering what you all are doing this weekend. If you don't have any big plans, would you like to help me move?" "Move? Dad, where are you moving to?" she asked. "I bought a house, honey. It's not far away, only about 20 minutes. I could hear Brea shouting to her sister and Chris, "Hey, Dad bought a house!" Through the phone, I could hear everyone surprised. Brea was trying to answer a lot of questions from her sister and Mom. "Honey," I said, trying to get her attention back. "Honey, tell Catherine and your mom that if they want to see the house, they need to come to the condo on Saturday morning at 7 and help me move some things." Brea passed on my message, and I heard Chris say, "Tell him we'll be there," which Brea repeated back to me. After we said our goodbyes, I hung up the phone, but it rang again. I picked it up with my usual friendly greeting. "Hi," I recognized Sandy's voice right away. "Hi, how are you?" I asked. "Okay, I was just wondering when you're moving," Sandy replied. "Saturday morning," I said. "I have a small truck rented, and my kids and a few friends are coming to help." "Oh, I see," she responded. I was about to offer to help, but it seemed like she had it all sorted out. I was getting confused by this woman. At first, she seemed interested, but when we sat down to sign the papers, she was all business and kind of distant. Now she was saying she'd help me move? It didn't make sense. All I knew was that I liked her a lot, and I wanted to spend time with her. "Hey, I could always use more help," I said, trying to sound friendly. "Okay, I'd love to, she replied, sounding cheerful. I have something for you, too. I forgot to give you the extra set of keys. I'll tell you what. Since you live up there, there's no need to come all the way here just to go back. I think we'll get there around 9 o'clock. Why don't you let yourself in and wait for us? Sandy agreed, and I was ready for the move. By Saturday morning, everything was packed and by the door. With the 6 of us, we loaded the truck in just over an hour. I thought we'd arrive before Sandy, but as soon as I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car by the house. When we walked in, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. What a nice surprise. Sandy was already making coffee when we followed the delicious smell into the kitchen. There, we found she had put out some pastries for everyone to enjoy. I usually saw Sandy in her work clothes, so I was surprised by how nice she looked in her blue jeans. When she heard us coming, Sandy turned around and greeted us with a cheerful, "Good morning," and a big smile. "I thought you might be hungry, so I picked up some treats from the bakery. Please help yourselves." Before anyone sat down, I introduced Sandy as my real estate agent. She joined us for breakfast and fit in like she'd known everyone for a long time. Once everything was settled in the house, my 2 friends left, leaving Chris, the kids, Sandy, and me. The girls were busy running around and changing the furniture every few minutes while the 3 of us chatted. Finally, Chris told the girls it was time to go. "This is a lovely home, Brent," Chris said as I walked her to the door. While we waited for the girls, Chris lowered her voice. "I didn't realize you were seeing someone," she said, sounding a bit sad. I noticed a hint of sadness in her beautiful green eyes. "We're not really seeing each other, Chris. I like her, but so far we've only had dinner together." "Ah, that'll change, trust me. I saw the way she looked at you. She cares about you. A lot. We women just know these things. She's very nice, and I'm sure you 2 will be happy together." Chris turned her head slightly to hide a tear from the corner of her eye. Just then, Brea and Catherine came running up. Both Sandy and Chris were very friendly as they said goodbye. The girls were their usual energetic selves all the way out the door. Now, Sandy and I were finally alone. I wondered if Chris was right. This was the first time I felt this way about a woman since my divorce. Could I really open my heart again? Or would I back away, scared of getting hurt once more? "Sandy, thank you so much for your help today. Fresh coffee and breakfast were such a nice surprise. How much do I owe you for all of that?" I asked. Sandy playfully touched my arm. "Come on, you don't owe me anything. I should be thanking you for the sale I just made here." "Okay, then let me take you out for dinner again." "Not like this," Sandy said, pointing to her work clothes. "Yeah, you're right. I should shower and change, too." "Sure, give me your address and I'll come get you in an hour." She looked at me, unsure if she wanted to. Finally, she said, "Okay, do you have a pen and paper? I'll write my address for you." For the first time in a long while, I found myself singing in the shower, something I usually did when I had someone special in my life. I drove to her address and saw it was a townhouse, part of a group of 4 units where each had its own yard. Every time I had seen Sandy before, she was dressed for work, always looking polished. When she opened the door and welcomed me in, I was surprised. Her soft, shiny blonde hair framed her face beautifully and fell over her shoulders. She wore a small dress that complemented her figure and just a touch of makeup that made her deep blue eyes stand out even more. "Wow," I said. "Sandy, you look amazing." "Thank you," she replied, seeming a bit taken aback. "I appreciate that, especially coming from someone who works with models." Once we were seated at the restaurant, we easily continued our earlier conversation. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sandy inquired. "Of course," I replied. "It's clear to anyone that Chris still has feelings for you." "Why are you 2 divorced?" I wasn't prepared for that question. Talking about it always made me emotional. "Well, it's a bit tough to discuss, Sandy, even after all this time." "I see, it sounds like infidelity is the issue," she mentioned. "I had a feeling that might be the case. I won't pry any further. The same thing happened with my husband. He was a manager at a company. For 5 years, he never had to work on weekends. Then one day it changed. Suddenly he was working every weekend. Sometimes just Saturdays and other times both Saturday and Sunday. I grew suspicious, so one day I borrowed my neighbor's car to follow him. I saw him walk into an apartment, so I waited outside the door. About 3 hours later, he opened it to leave, still kissing his girlfriend, a young woman with red hair. When he saw me waiting, he just closed the door and didn't come back. Ron, my son, was only 8 years old then. "I'm sorry," I said gently. She looked at me closely as if trying to read my expression. "I'll be honest, Brent. I still feel the pain from that moment, and I'm sure you remember your own tough times, too. In all these years, I haven't met a man worth risking that hurt again. I like you a lot, Brent, but before I go further, I need to know about your relationship with Chris. She still has feelings for you, and I think you care for her, too. Is there any chance you two could get back together? Sandy, we've been divorced for over 9 years now. 3 times in that time, she has asked if I would return. You're right, I do still have feelings for her, but I cannot change the pain in my heart. We both understand that. No, we won't be together again." I took a sip of my coffee and continued. "Sandy, from the first time I saw you, I thought you were someone very special. You are the first woman I've liked in a long time. You really hit the nail on the head when you talked about finding someone worth taking a chance on. I believe I've found that person, and I hope she feels the same way." Sandy reached out and took my hand. She leaned closer and lowered her voice to a soft whisper. "Am I the first woman to make you feel this way with just a little kiss?" she asked with a sweet smile. I could feel my face getting warm. She definitely meant to tease me, and it worked. "Did you notice that?" I replied, surprised. "Of course. We women can pick up on a lot," she said with a playful glance. "Once you finish your coffee, how about we head back to your place and see if you remember what to do with that?" I felt nervous on the drive home. It was more than just a little worry. I hadn't been close to someone in a long time. I tried to seem relaxed and sure of myself, but it didn't really work. "Are you nervous?" Sandy asked. "Yeah, I guess I am a bit. What about you?" I replied. "Yeah, a little. How long has it been for you?" "Years," I admitted. "But you know what they say, it's just like riding a bike." Sandy laughed. "Don't you mean it's like falling off a bike?" "Oh, yeah, that's what I meant," I said, feeling a bit silly. Then I tried to lighten the mood, saying, "But if I do fall, will you help me get back up?" "You got it, cowboy," she said with a laugh. Wow. This felt amazing. I was spending my first night in a brand new home with someone I had feelings for after so long. As we walked in, a calmness washed over me. I knew everything would be all right. Once inside, Sandy and I stood facing each other. I took her in my arms and gently kissed her. I felt relaxed and at ease. I felt a deep sense of affection, a warmth I thought I might never experience again. As we entered the bedroom, that feeling only grew stronger. I gently unzipped the back of her dress, softly brushing her neck as the dress slipped from her shoulders and fell to the floor. Wrapping my arms around her, I held her close, feeling the connection between us deepen. She turned toward me, her arms around my neck, and kissed me with intensity. We shared a tender moment, our closeness undeniable. We embraced, sharing the quiet moments as our bond grew stronger with every touch. There was a simple, gentle intimacy that filled the room as we stood together. I gently lowered my hands down the sides of her hips, feeling the softness of her skin. Her whole body shivered slightly as I moved slowly, savoring the moment. I admired her, feeling the connection between us deepening. I placed my hands on her back, appreciating the closeness we were sharing. She sighed softly as I kissed her, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond we were building. Her body responded as I gently held her, our emotions intertwined in the moment. "It's been so long," she whispered with warmth, her voice full of affection. "Please, let's share this." I lifted her carefully and laid her down on the bed. As I joined her, I kissed her softly, feeling the warmth between us grow. "I want to be close to you," she whispered. Years had been kind to us, and the connection we shared felt natural, as if time had brought us to this very moment. She welcomed me with open arms, and we shared a quiet, meaningful embrace as we grew closer, cherishing the intimacy we had found together. Sandy gently guided me closer, and I felt the warmth of our connection as we moved together. It had been a long time since I had felt such closeness with someone I deeply cared for. With each moment, the bond between us grew stronger. Sandy's body responded to the emotions we were sharing, her eyes closed as she embraced the experience fully. We moved in harmony, our feelings building with every second until the intensity between us reached its peak. Afterward, we lay side by side, both of us breathing deeply, feeling the calm after such a meaningful moment together. Neither of us said anything as we calmed our breathing. Sandy was the first to speak. Wow. Yeah, I'll match your wow with a holy cow. She laughed. How do you feel? I asked. Well, I feel scared, I guess. Scared? Still? Yes, still. Even more now, she admitted. I didn't realize until we got closer just how strong my feelings are for you. I'm worried I'm getting too involved too fast. I promised myself I would take this slow and be careful. Instead, I jumped in without thinking. So yeah, I'm scared. I took a moment to think about what she said. I felt a bit the same way. I tilted my head toward her and kissed her. My dear, my feelings for you are real and run deep. I can't believe I'm lucky enough to find love again, and now that I have, I won't let it slip away. I hoped for her to express her feelings too, but it didn't happen. She kissed me and smiled. Let's get some rest, sweetie. Tomorrow we can go shopping for your new home. Oh, I didn't mention it before, but I've decided to help you decorate. I told her that made me very happy. We shared a sweet kiss and drifted off to sleep, although I felt a little sad because I wished she had said she loved me back. The next morning I reached for Sandy while still waking up, but she wasn't there. My heart sank, thinking she might have left. Just then I caught a whiff of coffee. I smiled and told myself not to be upset about her not saying she loved me last night. I was just happy she was still there. We spent the whole day shopping downtown for the house. We mostly looked for smaller things. I also needed new furniture for the living room, but that would have to wait for another day. By the time we got home, we were both really tired. Sandy eagerly agreed when I suggested we order a pizza for dinner. As we enjoyed a Chicago-style deep dish, we talked about what we still needed for the house. All day we had shared laughs and jokes. I couldn't recall a time when I had more fun or appreciated someone's company as much. As the day wrapped up, Sandy took my hand and led me out to the porch. Come on, she said. Let's sit on the swing and watch the sunset. While we sat, the sky began to change. The dark blue of night spread like a curtain, blending into a beautiful mix of colors. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, shades of red, orange, purple, pink, and turquoise filled the sky. When I was a girl, I would sit with my grandma on her porch in Indiana and watch the sunsets. Sandy reminisced. She would say we were watching God paint the sky. Then she looked into my eyes and gave me a gentle kiss. Ooh, look how beautiful, she said, turning to admire the colorful sky. God is painting again, and I get to enjoy it with the person I love. I smiled and wrapped my arm around her. She snuggled close, resting her head on my shoulder. We stayed quiet, watching as the colors slowly faded into night. Can you stay over again? I asked. I'm sorry, but I can't tonight. I need to head home. I've got an early meeting in the morning, and Ron is coming back later this week for summer vacation. I hope you get to meet him. I know he'll be curious about photography. Why wouldn't I meet him if he's here all summer? Well, he'll be working most of the summer. He needs to earn money to help pay for his living expenses next year. Last year, he was lucky and found 2 jobs. He worked at a gas station and as a stock person in a grocery store. I didn't see him often, but he helped with many of his costs. When is he coming back? I asked. He'll be back sometime Wednesday night. Okay, so if he starts work on Monday, will you two get to spend some time together? Of course, but there's no guarantee he'll find a job that fast. It's hard for college students since they all graduate around the same time. Sandy didn't know me well yet, or she would have realized I had a plan. I asked, Does Ron have a car? Sandy laughed a little. Not really, it's barely working. I just hope it lasts another year. Well, if he leaves the car at home, he will have a 5-block walk to the train station, I said, curious if she was catching on. What? She asked, looking at me with confusion. What train station? What are you saying? I mean, until he gets used to the area, he can ride with me. Tell him to be ready Monday morning at 7 and I'll come pick him up. Sandy just looked at me. Can you share what's going on in your mind? Sure. I just hired Ron to work in my studio this summer as an assistant. It's perfect because I get to know Ron and he gets a job. Oh, Brent, you're not joking, right? You can really just hire him like that? Of course. It's my studio, so I can hire anyone I want. Oh, wow. You have to tell him. He's going to be so excited. You're amazing. We shared a sweet moment, but then she had to go home. That night, for the first time in a long while, I felt the emptiness of my bed. I missed her already. With Sandy busy with her job and getting ready for Ron's return, Tuesday night was the only time we could see each other. I was really looking forward to spending more time together once things settled down. Early the next Monday morning, I arrived at Sandy's place and knocked on the door. Sandy, looking a bit sleepy in her robe, welcomed me in with a big kiss and offered me a quick cup of coffee. She mentioned that Ron was so thrilled he was running around excitedly but would be down soon. Excited didn't quite capture it. The tall, dark-haired 20-year-old was beaming with joy when he took my hand and nearly shook it off, thanking me again and again and sharing how much this meant to him. Sandy smiled warmly, watching us as she sipped her coffee. Finally, Ron released my hand and headed toward the door, eager to begin his first day. I could see the warmth in Sandy's eyes as she gently kissed my cheek. "Thank you again for this," she said softly, giving my arm a light touch. I quickly realized how wonderfully Sandy had raised Ron. He was kind, polite, smart, and grateful. Audrey, who managed my office, and Terry, the other photographer, both made him feel welcome as if he were part of the family right away. That Wednesday night, I came to pick up Sandy for our date. She looked lovely, as always, when she opened the door and welcomed me inside. "Where's your cape?" she asked with a playful grin. My cape?" I was confused and didn't understand what she meant. "Yes, you should have a red cape. My son thinks you're Superman. He says you know everything about photography and much more," she said with a laugh. "Well," I replied humbly, "I might not know everything. There are still a few things I'm not sure about." Sandy smiled and gently placed her hands on my cheeks, bringing my lips close to hers. "Mwah!" She made a fun sound at the end of the kiss. "You're my Superman," she said. "Let's go. I can't wait to see you tonight." And we sure enjoyed our time together. For the next 2 weeks, Sandy and I spent our evenings decorating the house and enjoying each other's company. If she had an early meeting the next day, she would go home afterward. Otherwise, she would stay with me. "What does Ron think about you staying over?" I asked her one morning. He was a little surprised at first. I rarely dated when he was growing up, so he wasn't used to me being out late. But he's grown up now. He's a sophomore in college, so I'm sure he understands everything just fine. "He's a great kid, Sandy." "You really did a great job raising him," I told her. "Do you want to know what he said about you?" "I already know. I'm like Superman," I said with a laugh. "When I told him that you were the man I had been spending my nights with, he said he had dreamed about you being his father and wondered if that could ever happen." "Wow," I replied, feeling a bit bashful. "I don't think I've ever received a nicer compliment." "What did you say?" "I told him it's still too early to know," she said, looking into my eyes and giving me a quick kiss. By the next weekend, the house was finished except for the basement. We would have to wait to do that until my condo sold. Sandy's decorating skills were even better than I expected. Each room showed my personality and taste. "Honey, this place is perfect," I said. "It's too nice to keep to ourselves. Let's have a housewarming party." Sandy thought that was a wonderful idea. We decided to invite some of her friends and some of mine, and I could use the new grill in the backyard. Later, after making some initial plans for the party, we both enjoyed our favorite activity together. We sat on the swing on the back porch and watched the sun set. As we sat there, I thought about how much the woman next to me had brightened my life in just a few months. I remembered how frustrated I felt with myself for taking the wrong turn that led me here. It seemed like something special was happening. I could actually be happy again. And maybe I could bring happiness to Sandy, too. I felt her rest her head on my shoulder and wondered if she felt the same way. The next week, the invitations were sent out. "No gifts needed," they said. "I have everything I want." I think overwhelmed with joy is a good way to describe how I felt. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and half an hour later, the party was in full swing. Sandy introduced me to her friends, and I did the same. My ex was there with my 2 daughters. Brea was showing me her boyfriend when I caught sight of Chris. She had a little smile on her face. After all these years, we could understand each other without words. I knew she was reminding me that my girls were growing up, and I had to accept it. As the party went on, I found my usual spot in front of my new 2-deck grill. Ron, who came alone, jumped right in to help his mom and me make sure everyone was having fun. The surprise of the night was when I looked for my lovely co-host and saw her chatting away with my ex. It seemed like Chris and my ex were becoming good friends. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. It made me a bit anxious. Overall, it had been one of the most enjoyable nights I could remember in a long time. Eventually, I even warmed up to Brea's boyfriend, even though I had a feeling he wouldn't last long with her. As the night went on, the group slowly began to leave, and around 1 in the morning, except for Ron, who was helping clean up, Sandy and I found ourselves alone. "Honey," Sandy said to Ron, who was wiping down one of the folding tables, "that stuff can wait until tomorrow. I'm going to stay here for the night. Why don't you go home and get some rest?" Ron thanked us both and shared how much fun he had. Then he left. I was putting some food in the fridge. When I turned around to talk to Sandy, she was gone. Just as I was about to look for her, she came back through the front door, holding a package she had hidden in her car. "I know we said no gifts, but I'm not like everyone else," she said with a smile as she handed me the wrapped present. I was really happy. Since my daughters only bought me ties for Christmas and my birthday, it had been a long time since anyone gave me a present. As I opened the package, I found the most beautiful set of crystal wind chimes I had ever seen. "Oh, honey, they're wonderful. I'm so glad you like them. I took almost a month to find the right ones," she said with pride. I went downstairs to get a hammer and a nail. Together, we headed to the back porch, trying out different spots before choosing the perfect place to hang them. Sandy said it was the best spot to catch the softest breeze. Within minutes, we were listening to the sweet sound they made in the wind. We sat close together on the swing, enjoying the warm summer air and the lovely music from the wind chimes. I also had a special gift for Sandy. I had bought it 3 weeks earlier at a local jewelry store. I planned to create a romantic evening for my proposal, but as Sandy snuggled closer to me, I realized that no plan could beat the romance of this moment. I reached into my pocket and held the ring tightly in my hand. "Honey." "Yes?" she replied softly, enjoying the peacefulness around us. "I know we haven't known each other long, and because we've both been hurt before, we both agreed to take our time and not rush things. I understand that every moment we spend apart feels like time lost and lonely for me. I know you told Ron that we need to take our time, but I'm finding it hard to wait any longer. When you aren't by my side, I truly long for you." I held her left hand and gently placed the ring on her finger. "I didn't think I would ever say this again, but I love you and want you to be my wife," I said, feeling a tear roll down my cheek. She gazed at me. She had tears in her eyes, even more than I did. "What took you so long?" she said, her tears flowing. We hugged each other tightly and spent a long time just holding each other on the swing. As dawn approached, we went to bed but didn't really sleep. We stayed close, enjoying each other's warmth until we finally drifted off. Over the next few weeks, not much changed. We were making plans for our wedding, but so far only Ron knew. He was thrilled for us. Sandy mostly lived with me now, so Ron had the place to himself. At first, Sandy felt a bit guilty, but Ron assured her he enjoyed the quiet. I was worried about Chris and the kids. I knew that my wedding news would hurt Chris a lot. I feared the kids might take her side against me. As much as I tried to hide my feelings, I felt like I was failing. One evening, while we were on the swing, Sandy looked into my eyes. "You're worried about Chris, aren't you?" she asked. "I'm sorry, my love. I never intended to hurt her, and this will be very painful for her. I don't know if we should invite her to the wedding. It might make things worse, but how can I invite my daughters without including her? I just don't know what the right choice is." "I think Chris will be okay," she said gently. "We're having lunch tomorrow, and I've been thinking about whether I should tell her myself. I'm not sure if it would be easier if I told her or if you should." I was surprised to hear they were going to lunch together. I think Sandy noticed my reaction. "Chris and I have become good friends," she explained. "I met her at the party. Yes, I saw that you two were really connecting. When you didn't want to discuss what happened between you and her at the restaurant, I realized she had hurt you a lot, and you were still feeling that pain. At first, I thought she must be a terrible person, but she's not. She's a good person who made a big mistake, and she has already paid for it by losing you." Sandy kissed me softly and continued, Chris doesn't think that's enough punishment. She has not only lost you, but also closed herself off from any other love. I believe I can help Chris open her heart again, and our marriage can support that. I listened closely. I was still worried about Chris and Sandy having lunch together. I loved Sandy and wanted to trust her. Sweetheart, there are two main concerns. First, I don't want to hurt Chris, and second, I want to make sure my kids are okay with all of this. I understand, she said. If you'd like me to step back, I will. I can call and push back our lunch until after you speak to her, but I truly believe I can help Chris. I looked into Sandy's kind eyes. Will Chris think I'm being weak if I let you tell her instead of doing it myself? I asked. No, I'll make sure she understands. She already knows what's going on. She sensed it the first time we met. Yeah, you might be right. I remember she said something during the move. She left and wished us happiness. Please, sweetheart. Sandy gently ran her fingers through my hair as she looked intently into my eyes. Can I talk to her? I was still a bit nervous, but I agreed to let Sandy share the news about our wedding with Chris the next day at lunch. The next day, I was a bundle of nerves. Everyone kept asking if everything was okay. I assured them it was, but I wasn't sure if I sounded convincing. I glanced at my watch around noon, wondering if they were talking yet. At 1 o'clock, I began to worry if Sandy had told Chris about our wedding plans. Every minute, I expected a call from a sad Chris or from my kids saying they never wanted to see me again. By 3 o'clock, I was puzzled why Sandy hadn't called to tell me how it went. By 3:30, I was really anxious. A few minutes later, the studio phone rang. Audrey picked it up before I could get to it. Brent, it's Sandy, she said. Hi, how did it go? I asked. I've been really anxious. What took you so long to call? Calm down, she said with a little laugh. We're girls, remember? We just left each other. Chris and I had a good talk. I really like her, Brent. I wish I'd met her years ago. I think I could have helped. Well, did you tell her? How did she take it? Brent, Sandy said soothingly, everything is fine. You'll give yourself a heart attack if you don't relax. I told you she already knew. When I told her, she took it well. She'll explain everything to the kids tonight. I'm sure they'll call you and say how happy they are for you. I was in disbelief. I had been so worried. As Sandy spoke, it felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Later that evening, the girls called me. It's about time you found someone, Dad, Brea said. Sandy is really nice. I like her a lot. So does Mom. Catherine is curious if you can still visit, and then I heard Brea and Catherine begin to disagree. Just a moment, Dad. Catherine wants to talk to you. Here she is. Hi, Daddy. Hi, sweetheart, I replied. Daddy, will you still come over to help us with our homework? Of course, honey, I'm always here for you, I assured her. Good, said Catherine, sounding relieved. I'm glad for you too, Daddy. I really like Sandy. She's nice. Brea joined the call, and we all talked a little more together. The girls sounded genuinely happy, but as we finished the call, I realized Chris hadn't joined us. I wondered if she took the news as well as Sandy hoped. The next day, just before noon, I got a surprise. Hi, Daddy, I heard from the front of the studio. I peeked around the corner and saw Chris with the girls. Well, I said as I hugged everyone, what a surprise! We were downtown shopping, and I wondered if you wanted to treat us to lunch, asked Chris. I'd love to, I replied. Ron heard the cheerful voices and came out to say hello. We chatted for a bit, then I took my lovely girls out for a nice meal. Hey, Dad, Brea said between bites of chicken. Does Ron have a girlfriend? Don't worry about that, sweetheart. He's too old for you. What about that guy, the one you brought to the party? Oh, Mark? He was too immature. We broke up right after. I figured that wouldn't last. After lunch, we all walked back to the studio together. The girls went to the back for a few minutes to chat with Ron, leaving Chris and me alone. Brent, I just want you to know how happy I am for you. Sandy is such a kind and caring person. She's exactly the kind of partner you need. We had lunch yesterday, and she made me think about maybe looking for someone special, too. I will always love you, my dear Brent, and I will never forgive myself for what I did. Yesterday, Sandy told me that I can live with my regrets, but I don't have to keep punishing myself. I know I will never have you back. If I had to lose you to someone, I'm glad it was Sandy. She stepped closer, and her lips almost touched mine. "Just one for old time's sake?" she asked. I held her in my arms like I used to and kissed her tenderly. As we pulled away, we both felt it would be the last kiss like that. She smiled at me before calling the girls, and they were on their way. Sandy and I didn't have much time to plan the wedding. Ron would return to school in less than 2 months, and I wanted to ask him to be my best man. Sandy said that since her son was going to be my best man, she wanted my daughters to be in her bridal party. What started as a small get-together grew into a big celebration. I didn't mind at all. The more the merrier. I wanted to share this special day with as many people as possible. The wedding was perfect, like something you would see in a movie. It took place in a lovely garden. Ron looked great as my best man, and both Brea and Catherine looked stunning in their dresses as bridesmaids. Sandy looked beautiful in her dress, and I wore my favorite tie with my best suit. The tie was a fancy one, a gift from Chris before our divorce. At the reception, I thought the day couldn't get any better. I stood next to my new bride when Chris approached us. She leaned in and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Congratulations, you two," she said warmly. Then, to my surprise, she introduced me to a man I didn't know. "This is Alan," she said with a big smile. "He's my date." I quickly reached out my hand. "Hi, Alan, nice to meet you." "And Brent," Chris said. "I think he plays better than you." "What? No way," I said playfully. "What's your score?" "7," he replied a bit shyly. "That's mine, too. When we get back from our trip, we should play a round together." With that, he seemed to relax and turned out to be a really nice guy. I couldn't believe my amazing wife did it again. She was right. It took her charm to bring Chris around. Shortly after that, I had another surprising moment. When the moment was right, Ron pulled me aside. "This might sound strange, but I never really knew my dad very well. Now that you and Mom are married?" "Ah, you're probably going to think I'm weird," he said. "Ron, you can ask or share anything with me. What's on your mind?" I replied. "Would it be okay if I called you Dad?" he asked. I was taken aback. I had already thought of him as a son, but I didn't see this coming. "Son, I would be honored," I told him. "Thanks," he said with a smile. "Since you're in such a good mood, there's one more thing." I waited, curious about what he would say next. "Could you talk to Mom for me? I know she won't like the idea, but I'm planning to change my major when I go back to school. I looked into it, and with the credits I have, I can do it. I'm going to study photography," he said. If there was ever a night for surprises, this was it. I can't wait to tell Sandy about this, I thought. I agreed to talk to his mom, and since he would be back in school by the time we returned, we hugged and said goodbye. When Sandy saw us, she came over and did the same. Sandy had tears in her eyes, but Ron promised he would come back for Christmas. I thought to myself, great. I only have a little time until Christmas to tell Sandy that her son won't be an engineer like they both planned, but instead, a photographer. Great. Just great. Then I couldn't help but smile. Soon after, Sandy and I were off to 2 amazing weeks in Maui, where we spent some of the best days of our lives. Before we left, I thought, if there is a paradise, it would be hard to beat this. When we flew back to Chicago, the trip might have been over, but our joy didn't end. Life with Sandy felt like a fairy tale. Each day we grew closer, became even more in sync, and fell more deeply in love. As the saying goes, time flies. It really does, and too quickly, if you ask me. Ron changed his major to photography, and he had a job waiting for him after he graduated. I waited until after our honeymoon to share the news with Sandy. When I finally told her, she was so happy with the change. She knew that photography was his true passion, just like it was mine. The thought of him learning the craft from me and possibly taking over the studio one day excited both of us. Brea graduated and started teaching. Back in high school, she met a wonderful guy, got married, and now I have 2 grandchildren. Catherine surprised me by choosing journalism in college. With a little help from me, she landed a job straight out of school at my old workplace, the Times. She also found someone special and got married. They don't have any kids yet, but they are very much in love, so I'm sure that will happen soon. Chris married Alan, and they were also a very happy couple. The more I got to know Alan, the more I liked him. Our friendship grew strong, and the 4 of us became great friends. Sandy and I often went out with Chris and Al and I spent most weekends hanging out on different adventures. One year, the 4 of us even went on a cruise together. Yes, Walt Disney couldn't have imagined a happier life for Sandy and me. When we were at home, most evenings ended with Sandy and me snuggled up on the back porch swing, watching the sunset and listening to the wind. Sandy would say it sounded like soft rain tapping on the wings of angels. Life felt perfect, and we couldn't have been happier. I was sitting at the kitchen table when Sandy walked in to make herself a cup of morning coffee. She looked troubled, which was unusual for her. "What's the matter, honey?" I asked, feeling concerned. It was strange to see her without a smile. She sat down next to me, took a sip from her cup, and looked at me with tears in her eyes. I knew something was wrong. "Honey, what is it? Please tell me," I urged gently. "As I was getting ready, I found a lump," she said quietly. I felt a wave of panic, but I knew I had to stay calm for Sandy. I took her hand and spoke softly. "Try not to worry. I'm here for you, and I won't let anything happen to you. You know, a lot of these worries turn out to be nothing." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll get you checked out soon. You enjoy your coffee, and I'm going to call the doctor right away to make an appointment." On the outside, I acted calm and collected. Inside, I was very anxious. I called Sandy's doctor and set up an appointment. Maybe we wouldn't even need to worry about more tests. Then I called Ron and let him know I would take a few days off, asking him to manage the studio. He wanted to know if something was wrong, but I didn't want to upset him. I just said that Sandy and I wanted to enjoy a little quiet time together. Later that afternoon, I sat in the waiting room while her doctor examined Sandy. After the exam, I was asked to come in, and I sat with my dear wife, waiting to hear what would happen next. The doctor said that a biopsy was needed and arranged for outpatient surgery at the hospital later in the week. He tried to ease our worries, saying that it was likely nothing serious, but he wanted to be careful. We both agreed, and I took Sandy out for a nice lunch afterward. Inside, I felt anxious, but I tried to stay positive for Sandy's sake. Driving her to the hospital, I filled out all the paperwork while they got her ready. I was allowed to see her just before they took her into the operating room. I kissed her, reassured her not to worry, and promised I would be there when she came out. About an hour later, my beeper went off, letting me know that Sandy was out of surgery. I was right by her side, holding her hand as she woke up. I took her home, ordered her medication for pain, and had it delivered. For the rest of the day and night, I took care of her. By the next morning, she felt better and joined me at the breakfast table. Now, we were just waiting for news. 2 days later, the doctor called. He didn't reveal what they had found, but wanted to see us in his office. I didn't tell Sandy, but I thought if it were good news, he would have shared it over the phone. I started to pray that I could stay strong, even though all I wanted was to cry. We sat next to each other, holding hands as the doctor shared the news. Sandy had a serious form of breast cancer, and she would need surgery to remove both breasts. When I heard this, Sandy fell into my arms. I couldn't help but wonder why, with so many bad things in the world, something like this had to happen to someone like her. Trying to stay strong, I held her close and offered as much comfort as I could. The doctor wanted to schedule the surgery quickly. He mentioned that after the surgery, there would be treatments to remove any remaining cells. He also said they could plan for surgery to help with breast reconstruction later on. He gave me some medication to help her rest, so when we got home, I tucked her into bed. Then it was time to make some phone calls. I was really stressed about it. How could I talk about this without breaking down? I managed to call Ron and Chris, but I asked them to reach out to everyone else. I just couldn't handle talking about it any longer. On the day of her surgery, the whole family was there. I stayed with Sandy for as long as I could, but after the nurse took her into the operating room, I needed to step away. I think everyone searched the hospital for me, but no one thought to check the chapel. Chris was the one who figured out where I was. When she came in quietly, she found me on my knees, making all sorts of promises and asking for help for Sandy. The surgery lasted for several hours, but for me, it felt like forever. I was the only one allowed in the recovery room with her, so after I heard that she made it through the surgery okay, the rest of the family went home for the night. For the next 5 days, while she stayed in the hospital, I only left Sandy's side when Ron took over so I could go home, take a shower, and change clothes. When I finally brought her home, our whole family and some friends were there to greet her. It was wonderful to see her smile again, thanks to everyone who tried hard to make her feel better. In the weeks that followed, we tried to live as normally as possible. But it was tough. The chemotherapy and radiation treatments were causing her a lot of discomfort. Even with medication to help with her nausea, Sandy was having a hard time eating and often felt sick. She was losing weight, looking pale, and becoming weaker each day. I felt anxious as I took her for her next checkup. I had been blaming her condition on the treatments, but deep down, I was scared. After the exam, her doctor admitted her back to the hospital. I was walking to her room when I saw him coming toward me in the hallway. "What's happening?" I asked. "Why is she back here?" He looked into my eyes, and from his face, I knew he was about to share more bad news. "I'm sorry, Brent," he said quietly. "The cancer isn't responding to the treatments as we hoped. It's spreading in her body. At this point," he paused. "I'm really sorry, but there's nothing more we can do." My sadness turned into anger. "What do you mean there's nothing more you can do?" I thought. I grabbed the collar of his coat and pulled him closer to my face. "Listen to me. That woman in there is as important as the president. Do you understand? She's the president, and you're going to help her." Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Alan and Chris beside me. "We're really sorry, Brent," Alan said, "but it won't help to upset the doctors. They can't control what happens now." I released the doctor, who still seemed kind and didn't blame me for my outburst. "I'm so sorry," he said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder before moving along. They stopped the treatments and allowed Sandy to rest in the hospital. I noticed she was getting weaker each day, but I stayed hopeful, telling her she would get better. On the 6th day, I sat by Sandy's bed holding her hand. She looked into my eyes and asked me to take her home. I called Ron to let him know and arranged for hospice care. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Sandy was comfortably settled in her own bed at home. Ron moved into the extra bedroom. He still worked at the studio during the day, but was there with me every night to help with her needs. One late afternoon, just a few days after bringing her home, Sandy asked me to take her to the swing. She said she felt it would be a special sunset. I lifted her gently in my arms and carried her to our favorite spot. I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat beside her. I put my arm around her and held her close as she cuddled against me. I'm not sure how she knew, but even though most of the day had been gray, the evening turned into the most beautiful sunset I had ever seen. I thought that maybe God had found new colors to paint with. As I held her, we watched the sun dip below the horizon, filling the sky with warm colors. Sandy looked up at me, smiled, and kissed my cheek. "I love you so much," she said, and rested her head on my chest. "I love you too, my dear," I replied, gently stroking her cheek with my hand. A gentle breeze made the wind chimes sing a lovely tune. When it stopped, Sandy took her final breath. We were still sitting together when Ron came home and found us on the swing. He saw my tear-streaked face and understood what had happened. A week after Sandy's funeral, I returned to her gravesite. I brought a long metal rod with a sharp end and a hook on the other side. I pushed the sharp end into the ground next to her headstone until just about 18 inches were left above the soil. Then I hung the beautiful crystal wind chimes on the hook. "This is for you, my dear," I said aloud, "so you can hear the gentle sounds of nature forever and always remember the love and joy we had." For about a month, my family decided to watch over me closely. Oh, they never told me what they were doing, but it was pretty clear. I had someone with me all the time. Chris and Alan even stayed for a few days. People say that time heals all wounds, but that's not true. It just helps you manage the pain a little better. Someone once said, "The circle of life continues." I guess that's right. Later that year, Catherine and her husband Peter welcomed another grandson. Soon after, Ron found the love of his life and became a happy husband. For a few years, I still went to the studio each day, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I offered Ron a chance to buy it and just pay me from the profits. Naturally, he was excited about it. In the past couple of years, my kids had been encouraging me to sell the house and move to a place where I wouldn't have to worry about upkeep and yard work, but I could never sell our home. Never. I found myself still lying down as I slowly began to realize what was happening around me. I felt my body start to shake as a sharp pain hit my chest. The chances of me surviving were looking slim. I was so cold I could feel it deep in my bones. I tried to move closer to the house, reaching up and pulling myself just a little bit, but I didn't have any strength left. Maybe if I took a short break, I thought. I closed my eyes and rested my cheek on the freezing grass. Suddenly it felt like the pain was lifting from me, not just the pain in my chest, but all the aches that come with getting older. The cold in my bones faded away, replaced by a warm feeling inside. It was as if I had gone back 30 years. I felt a calm that filled me completely. That's when I heard it. The soft, clear sound of our wind chimes ringing in the breeze. I felt as light as a feather as I stood up from the cold ground. "Hi there. I've been waiting for you," a soft voice said. My heart raced when I turned to my right. My beloved Sandy sat on the swing, reaching out her hand to me. She looked whole again, with none of the signs of the illness that had troubled her. Her beautiful hair shined brightly, her clear blue eyes sparkled like stars, and a warm light surrounded her. I hurried to her side, filled with joy, and hugged her tightly. I wished to hold her forever. Words couldn't capture how I felt right then. "My dear, I've missed you so much," I told her. Sandy's smile filled me with warmth and happiness. "I know," she replied gently, "but we'll never have to miss each other again. We have all of eternity together." As I looked into her eyes, I heard the soft sounds of chimes, and Sandy leaned in to give me a sweet kiss. "Look," she said as we faced the horizon. You could see the sky changing colors like a beautiful painting. It was like a waterfall of bright colors flowing into a sea of clouds. There were reds, yellows, pinks, turquoise, blues, and golds. More colors than I had ever seen. Each color glowed with an amazing brightness that was hard to describe. It felt like we were watching the sunset from behind. "Ooh, look how pretty," Sandy said, "and I get to enjoy this with the man I care about." At that moment, the chimes rang out joyfully, sounding different than I had ever heard. Sandy looked into my eyes. "Listen," she said, "the last chimes of fall." She touched my cheek and gave me a gentle kiss. "It's time to go home, my dear." I felt a happiness I had never known before. I was free from any sadness or worries. My heart was open to love without limits. I smiled at Sandy, feeling grateful. "Let's go home," I said again, kissing her back gently. A chilly wind blew in from the east, but there were no bells to signal it, just the soft creaking of the empty swing moving in the wind.